Warning. Tongue and Geek contains heavy spoilers. If you haven't read, watched, or played the content being reviewed this episode, know that we will definitely spoil major plot points. Also, this show isn't for kids. We use words like and and it would take too much time and effort to edit them all out. Please don't tell our moms. Hello, lovely listeners, and welcome to Tongue in Geek, where two more white guys on the internet share their unsolicited opinions on all things geeky. I'm Isaac.
I'm Tyler.
And today we're doing a mega review of the Guardians of the Galaxy Trilogy, the MCU sci-fi films directed by James Gunn. Tyler, would you like to give us some background on these films?
You know, I tried to figure out what would be interesting background, and it all just kind of seemed like boring trivia-ish stuff. But I guess it's fun to give out that kind of stuff for people who might not be in the know. This team here that has been popularized by this trilogy in the MCU is actually the second iteration of the team in the comics that was formed during the Annihilation Conquest event in Marvel Comics. So that's how the popular, famous version of the Guardians of the Galaxy was formed. The original team had Yondu on it, actually.
Yep.
Completely different character in the comics as he is in the movies.
Hell yeah, absolutely. A lot of them are. I remember I actually had one of those old black and white omnibuses of the Defender comics, and they had a meetup with the Guardians of the Galaxy in one of their runs, and it was like Yondu. All of the Guardians of the Galaxy in the original team were like from planets in our solar system. So like there was this really big guy who was from Jupiter because of like the way the gravity like infected them. Basically their bodies were affected by the planets that they grew up on. And so I think there's a guy from Pluto that was all made of ice or crystal or something. And there's just Yondu who was just like a blue alien dude with this weird
fin on his head.
Fin on his head, yeah, for some reason.
Yeah, most of the original team actually has cameos in Volume 2. Sylvester Stallone, he plays Starhawk. He's like, I can't remember if he was the leader or the other guy was. It doesn't matter. Anyway, we're talking about the movies. So yes, the version of the team that is popular now is the second iteration, and there's a whole new one, a whole different one before. I guess I just like to tell everybody that James Gunn wrote the first two live-action Scooby-Doo movies. I just
okay.
I find that endlessly entertaining.
Okay,
because when those came out, they were kind of shit on, but they've kind of been reevaluated and appreciated more as they've aged. When you go back to watch them, you can totally kind of see his voice in them. So, no James Gunn retrospective is complete without a viewing of Scooby-Doo movies.
I love the second one. It's nuts. They're just weird takes on the Scooby franchise. Yeah, James Gunn is an interesting director. We've talked about his work before when we did our Suicide Squad episode. He's really good at taking obscure or B-list characters and just completely reimagining them into something else.
Yes. And you can tell he fucking loves comic books because he got his start in... I've told you about it before. Troma Entertainment. Troma is, as the founder Lloyd Kaufman loves to say, the oldest independent movie studio in America. They specialize in vulgar, offensive schlock, and it's incredible. James Gunn got his start there. He co-wrote one of the more acclaimed movies that they have, Tromeo and Juliet. Which, yes, it's what it sounds like. It's just a gross-out version of Romeo and Juliet that takes place in Troma, New Jersey. And he was put on the map with his horror film Slither, which is just an amazing homage to all kinds of different horror films of the past, and that's where his sense of humor really comes into play, his subversive sense of humor. A movie that doesn't get talked about from him is Super, which is a superhero movie, but his own original idea. It's kind of like Kick-Ass, but if Kick-Ass was even darker and more deranged.
Mm-hmm.
It's just about two very broken, very dysfunctional, fucked up people who decide to become superheroes.
Isn't that all superheroes?
Pretty much, but this one takes it to like the the dark end of the road of if somebody decided to actually do this.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then after that, he got scooped up by Marvel, and that's all she wrote.
Yeah, I remember when I saw the trailer for the first Guardians of the Galaxy. It was we were fresh off the heels of the Avengers. Marvel was like the new big thing that everyone was talking about. They're like, holy crap, can't believe they're doing this big like shared universe thing in the movies. That's crazy. It was brand new, it was fresh, it was hot, and I saw Guardians and I was like, okay, this is going to be the making or breaking point of the MCU. Because you're watching in the trailer, I remember like the go-to shot that everyone talked about was when like Rocket and Groot are like in the prison. They're both screaming. Rocket's firing his gun. And I remember looking at that and being like, this will be the deciding factor, because either people will be able to get on board with a talking raccoon and a talking tree man in space, or they won't. And like that's going to decide if general audiences are on board with Marvel movies. And obviously the consensus is, yeah, we're all in on Marvel movies and have been for the last decade.
Yeah, I think it is worth going into just how different the MCU sort of mindset was back then. Mm-hmm. Because even though it had been successful up until that point, there was still a lot of speculation on, when is the bubble going to burst? When are they going to have a massive flop? And a lot of people were so sure that this movie, Guardians of the Galaxy, would be their first dud. They're like, they're already running out of ideas. Who the hell are these characters? Nobody's ever heard of them. Not even comic book readers know who these people are. And yeah, there was a lot of speculation, riding on it, and like people were predicting it would sink. Mm-hmm. And I remember the trailer hitting. I'm like, this looks fucking good. Like, this looks really funny and unique. Yeah, the MCU was still not like the absolute omnipresent juggernaut that it is now. Mm-hmm. So after the Avengers, Guardians of the Galaxy was the proving ground, and it came out. It was a huge surprise. Like, not like just in context of being a comic book movie or even an MCU movie, but just as like a blockbuster movie. Mm-hmm. It kind of just took the world by storm and surprised the shit out of everyone. Yeah. And it's a fan favorite to this day, and let's not bury the lead. How do you want to get into it?
Yeah, let's jump into that first movie, because there's a lot that this first movie does in retrospect that sort of follows the Marvel formula that was being established at the time. I think this is the one that's most in line with the MCU style of storytelling, but it also took a lot of risks for the time period in the way that it went about it. Because movie starts off, kid watching his mother die of cancer. Like, that's the opening scene of this film.
Yep.
And you're sitting there in a theater for the first, 5 minutes, I thought I bought a ticket to something with, a raccoon and a tree in it. What the hell's going on?
Why am I already feeling this?
It's a completely throws you off from your expectations of that this is going to be a wacky, goofy space adventure, because it is that, but it also immediately sets the stage of yes, it's a wacky, goofy space adventure, but we've got a deeper, more tragic story to tell beneath all the antics.
Oh man, I don't know how to, because there's so much. See, this is why I wish we did this professionally, because if we got paid to do this, I'd actually take the time to
so
write out talking
You're just saying that you're entirely motivated by money.
Yes.
Okay.
Rise and grind, baby.
Mm-hmm. You see, I do take the time to make out talking points, and I'm not paid a fucking dime, and I do the editing on this too. I
can't quite use the excuse of I'm a working man with a family, because you're also a working man with a family.
And I also put in the time to edit this shit, you lazy bitch. Let me move a little bit. We both sort of agreed there was a lot of this that we saw, like the old school MCU storytelling in. It was still getting established at this point, but there are a lot of elements in this first movie. At its core, this film is a MacGuffin quest where the heroes have to save the world, or in this case, the galaxy, from a pretty generic, crazy bad guy. It's more polished, I think, in its overall storytelling than the other two films. There's a less glaring issues, but it lacks the highs that the others have.
Interesting. Because I had rewatched Volume 2 more recently than I had Volume 1. Mm-hmm. It's not called Volume 1, it's just called Guardians of the Galaxy, but for brevity, I'll just call it Volume 1.
Yeah, they retroactively call it that.
Upon the recent rewatch, the strict adherence to that 3-act fetch quest sort of structure really became apparent. Mm-hmm. And it kind of gets in the way of the movie a little bit. And I think Ronan really kind of takes it down a peg.
Oh, absolutely. Ronan is there to set up Thanos as a villain. Let's get into Ronan as a villain. Ronan the Accuser is a Kree fanatic, one of these alien races, and we're told that he hates this entire species called the Nova, or it's not even like a species, it's like a space empire. Hates them for some ongoing war that we never actually get to see. From the comics, It was like the Kree versus the Skrull. I guess they wanted to keep the Skrull for later on. So
the Xandarians is who he hates and wants to eradicate.
Right. But he's entire arc is just trying to basically eradicate an entire species, which, you can have genocidal maniac, but you got to do it in a way that's fun and interesting, and Ronan is just clear-cut. I'm a nutcase, I want to kill everybody of this race, and that's it. There's nothing to him. What he's there for is to establish the threat of Thanos, because A, his two sidekicks, Gamora and Nebula, are Thanos' adoptive daughters, and B, we get multiple scenes of him bargaining with Thanos for more power.
Back when this came out, and I loved it, so I still love it, don't get me wrong. Mm-hmm. This isn't me. I don't think it's either of us trashing the movie at all.
No.
But I do think it's actually the most openly flawed upon retrospect. We all know the MCU has a villain problem. Not always, but it's been the main ongoing complaint that people have had with it from its inception. And Ronan is bottom 5 maybe villains in my opinion, because his design, great. The actor Lee Pace, he's a good actor, but he's not very good in this. He's not very threatening. He just comes off like a petulant, whiny little idiot.
He's got no presence.
He's got no presence. If you're gonna create a villain that is a genocidal lunatic and motivated by fanaticism, religious fanaticism, you gotta do something with that.
Yeah.
And the movie does. It's the most vaguest of vague exposition and motivation, and that's it.
We don't even know anything about Kree culture or the Kree religion at this point. We never get anything about his personal beliefs. When you do one of these religious fanatics or these, political zealots, you've got to go real deep into the sort of ideology that has defined their way of life, and they don't do anything with them aside from, he kills people he doesn't like.
Yeah, it's just the one real negative sticking point in this movie, because everything around it is great. Mm-hmm. If the movie wasn't so fun and charming and emotional around Ronan, it'd be a bigger deal than it is, but still, as it stands, he is pretty much a big detriment.
And if there weren't other threats, because we also do have Nebula as his sidekick, and Nebula is a far more interesting antagonist due to her connection with Gamora, plus the Ravagers who are hunting down Quill and their connection with Quill. Basically, the problem with him, aside from the fact that he's just boring, is that there's no real connection between Ronan and the cast, aside from Drax. Drax is the only one he's got a connection to, but Drax is not the primary focus of this film.
Yeah, and you can tell once kind of the rose-tinted glasses of it being such a refreshing and fun movie wears off, you can kind of see the cracks in the foundation. Mm-hmm. But as a foundation, it still works really, really well because James Gunn puts in the time to create this group of characters that feel all very defined in like 2 hours of runtime.
Mm-hmm.
And he does that while setting up a lot for the Infinity Saga moving forward in a way that doesn't really detract from the overall movie itself.
Yeah. This one definitely feels like it was setting up for the sequels and for the interactions between the rest of the MCU more than the others do. The others feel more like their own standalone stories.
Yeah, you can tell that he got some notes like, okay, like we're gonna let you do what you want, with the tone, and the characters. But you gotta put this Infinity Stone stuff in there.
Yeah.
And we're gonna have a Thanos cameo in there too.
Yeah.
But God, the characters. I remember that first, not the prologue scene, which is gut wrenching, like immediately. I don't know how he does it, man. I'm sidetracking. I'm sorry. I don't know how this is going to be a theme. I don't know how he can manage to lay out such heavy and obvious emotional scenes and have them not feel cloying, and have them feel so sincere.
Love James Gunn, but let's give credit where credit's due. The cast in this do a phenomenal job of acting out these characters as well.
Oh, yeah, completely.
Chris Pratt, who had only really been in like Parks and Rec up until this point, we knew he could play a goofy, funny man, but like the emotional depth of Star-Lord's character, this sort of like smooth-talking man-child just sort of schmoozing his way throughout the galaxy, learning to become a mature adult who takes responsibility for himself and others. Like, his performance in that is so endearing because we get this funny goofball that we already know that Chris Pratt can play, but underneath that funny goofball is someone who is genuinely traumatized by the actions of their childhood and clinging to the brightness of their childhood to cope with it.
Yeah, and you just described him as a man-child, and he is, but that man-childishness is rooted in a traumatic event that happened to him when he was like 10 years old.
Yeah.
So
he can't grow up. Like
his development has been arrested in like the most almost literal way because Yondu comes and takes him pretty much as he's running out of the hospital after his mother just died right in front of him. So he has that love for his mother and also that trauma for his mother, and they're intertwined because he models everything about himself from his childhood that he shared with his mom. Mm-hmm. But it's that same childhood that's holding him back from making real connections with people, from maturing as a person. And Chris Pratt kind of blew up after this movie, and now the pendulum has swung in an opposite direction where people kind of hate him now. But it's easy to forget how good he is in this role. Like he plays the lovable, roguish goofball like really well, and it's never to the point where his goofiness undermines his competence, like because when shit hits the fan, like Star-Lord knows what he's doing, and he's gonna fuck you up, which is always fun to see in a character.
There's a balancing act that they do with him where, yes, there's a lot of scenes where he gets his butt kicked, but he's also a competent fighter. And it doesn't. He never feels hyper competent like some of the characters might, and he never feels incompetent. He feels like a guy who spent his entire life around space pirates, like he did, and had to learn how to fight and take care of himself. He's not like the best fighter on the team or the most competent, pilot or anything, but the skills that he has, he's good at them.
So after that prologue scene, we get into the actual opening scene of the movie proper, where this helmeted masked figure, who we assume is probably going to be the kid, grew up. He's landed on an alien planet, and it's like moody and mysterious, and he's entering a temple. The camera tracks down, and he hits play on his Walkman. He puts his headphones on, and then that song comes on as he's dancing, and then the title card, Guardians of the Galaxy, hits the screen. And when I tell you that, like, I felt the entire mood of the audience in the theater, like, vibe, like, I knew this was going to be something special.
Well, it's
because
amazing.
That moment is so disarming, and it works so well.
I think what it works so well with is that it works so well in tandem with the prologue scene, because within like the first 5 minutes of this film, we know everything we need to know about Peter Quill as a character. We see the trauma of his childhood, the moment he's taken from Earth, and then we see him grown up and him just sort of dancing around on this alien world, not taking his mission seriously, and we know exactly what we're getting into. This is a man who is, like you said, in Arrested Development, living out his childhood fantasies of these big, suave action heroes instead of having actually learned how to grow up and deal with his mature problems. But he's become so, like, he's got all this technology and skill that he doesn't have to grow up. He's found all these ways of coping and getting around the fact that he needs to actually be more mature and take things seriously.
And he uses an alien rat as a microphone, which is also amazing. He's obviously the main character, pretty much of the trilogy, but James Gunn says it's actually secretly Rocket.
And by the third one, you can tell.
But Quill is a really good anchor for building the team around.
Mm-hmm.
He's like the perfect everyman in that you can project yourself onto him, and he's the easiest to relate to at first, but you can tell he has that kind of demeanor about him as a character where, despite the fact that he doesn't really want to get close to people, you can tell that's kind of always been like a yearning of him,
mm-hmm.
of his. And it just takes this circumstance that he's found himself in to allow himself to open up to other people and for people to endear himself to him, because Gamora and Rocket and Groot, they're both on the fetch quest for the orb. It's the orb the whole time. I don't even remember what freaking power. Is
a power stone? Yeah.
Okay. They're both on. Each team is on separate missions to find the orb. Gamora for Ronan and Thanos, obviously. Rocket and Groot. Who hired them? I can't even remember.
They weren't hired by anybody. They were just looking for the bounty. Because Yondu put a bounty on Quill's head.
They get thrown into prison, and that's where they meet Drax, and this is where the first bonding, I guess you can call it the first bonding of the team is cemented. What character do you want to go to next?
Let's save Rocket, because I feel like he really is sort of integral to the movies going forward. Let's talk about Gamora, because I've realized I don't really like Gamora as a character, especially here in this first film.
It's sad, because a lot of people seem to kind of consider her the weak link.
And she is, and for some very... like, if you look back on it, there's some obvious problems, especially here in this first one. She's established as this, like, the ultimate daughter of Thanos. Her and Nebula have this thing going where they have this competition to see who can be, the better warrior serving Thanos. But Gamora is basically betraying Thanos. Like, she hates him. Her and Nebula both do, as we learn more about them. But Gamora hates him and is actually trying to save the galaxy from him. She's still supposed to be this super hyper competent assassin, but she's actually got probably the strongest moral code of anybody on the team. The problem is Gamora almost never wins, especially in this first movie. Like, that opening fight between her, Rocket, and Quill, she beats up Quill a little bit, but he actually gets to put her down by using one of his little jet rocket boosters, knocks her out. She's the only one in that team to go unconscious before the Nova Corps show up. Then in the prison scene, she's kidnapped by these random guys, and they, like, hold a knife to her throat, and it's like, this is the hyper-competent daughter of Thanos that's supposed to be one of the greatest assassins in the galaxy, and she gets kidnapped by two random schmucks in prison before Drax shows up and saves her, saying that, I'm going to kill her myself. She's playing this sort of damsel in distress role in multiple scenes, despite supposedly being a hyper-competent assassin. There's really never a point where we really get to see her kick ass, until towards the end we do get to see her fight with Nebula.
Yeah, that's a good point. I always did kind of think that they nerfed her a little bit, but I didn't really think too hard on it. Yeah, in the first movie especially, we really only see her just beat up some faceless goons, and she basically, I guess, wins against Nebula in the first movie. Yeah, I like her well enough. I think she has good chemistry with Chris Pratt and the rest of the cast. But yeah, she is kind of the weakest link in the team in the first movie. At least I do think she gets better in Volume 2. And is probably one of the better parts of Infinity War, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not the strongest showing for her as a character in this first movie. She does enough to round out the team and round out the group. But you don't leave that movie thinking, oh man, not Nebula, Gamora, she's the best. She kicks ass. She's amazing.
She's the straight man in terms of the comedy, because she's the one who has a moral core. She's the one who's, most competent on a logical level and social level. She's playing the straight man to everyone else, and it's just not as entertaining. And that's a shame, because for the first movie, she's the only female member of the team. It kind of sucks that all these other characters are bouncing off with all these quips and whatnot, and she's just sort of there. She really feels like she doesn't want to be there a lot, but she's just kind of putting up with it because for some reason she needs the rest of this team to get her mission complete.
Yeah, it's kind of hard because with a movie with this kind of tone and these kind of characters, you kind of need that straight man.
Mm-hmm.
Her characteristics, they're informed by the character. She makes sense as a character. It's just it fades into the background a little bit too much.
Yeah,
because everything else is like bigger and louder and more funny or unique than she is. I do like that she is the moral compass, especially like in Volume 2. I kind of like how she wants to be like the fixer, the problem solver. I think that's a good way to characterize her, considering her background with Thanos and Nebula.
Yeah, it's sort of weird in Volume 2, and we'll get to this when we get to it. She wants to be very supportive of Quill in his journey with his father, and I guess you can sort of see that as like maybe she's looking for catharsis due to her lack of a, strong familial connection with her own adoptive father. But like, it also kind of, there were moments in the second one where I'm sitting there like, girl, why are you being so cool about all this? He's sitting there bitching in front of you about his dad when yours is like the most notorious murderer in the galaxy.
Well, not to jump ahead, but I think it's justified, but we'll get there. Yeah, I wouldn't consider Gamora in Volume 1 a flaw necessarily, but she is kind of the weaker of the character of the core team for sure. Zoe Saldana, though, as Gamora is great.
Absolutely.
I love Zoe Saldana.
I think she does a phenomenal job with what she's given. I think just the writing and the way that like the film portrays her isn't great. Honestly, her entire relationship with Quill in at least the first movie is dependent on those two actors and their ability to like that chemistry that they have. I think if those two actors didn't have that great chemistry, I wouldn't have bought into the relationship between Peter and Gamora at all.
Yeah, that's fair. And for romantic tension to work for me, I don't need like a bunch of like preamble and build up to it. As long as the actors click and I feel like it makes a surface level amount of sense for who they are as characters in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
I love the trope of like a hard ass softening up and like catching themselves, like not wanting to. So that whole scene of her and Peter kind of bonding over the music on his Walkman and him kind of trying to get smooth with her and dance and stuff like that. and she's kind of feeling it. And she catches herself and she's like, I'm not going to be swayed by your pelvic sorcery.
Yeah.
That's a great line.
It's like there's a lot of great lines that are both really funny, but also really show the way that these characters... James Gunn does a phenomenal job of using comedy to express character. And that's what all of these films do, is that every joke comes from a place that lets you understand these characters more.
That's how you do it.
Yes.
That's how you get it done. You don't retcon a character to suit your own sense of humor for the lulls. I'm looking at you, Taika Waititi. We're not going down that path.
No, we've already done that whole thing.
We've exhausted it. All right, Gamora on to Drax.
Sure, let's talk about Drax. Drax is... He's interesting. Because in this first film, I forgot how much more subdued the performance for him here was.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
He's really more of the sort of like warrior who knows nothing but war trope, sort of like Knuckles was in Sonic 2. He knows war and nothing else. He's totally focused on being the best fighter he can be, on, fulfilling his honorable mission of avenging his wife and child. And anything else is just, nonsense to him. He doesn't care about anything else. And he's so hyper literal, which they say is like a facet of his species. So most of the comedy in this doesn't really come from Drax being a goofball. It really comes more from Drax just taking everything everyone says literally.
Really?
Which is phenomenal.
Which is fucking funny.
It's a really good concept, and it makes for a lot of good jokes. I love the one where they're explaining that, and like Rocket's like, his entire species is completely literal. It'll all just go over his head, and he's like, nothing goes over my head. I am too fast. I will catch it.
Yes.
Like, that's a perfect concept, because it makes him a pseudo straight man, where like he's not being funny, he's just taking things seriously, and that makes it funnier.
Yeah. And this is, I can't remember if this was Dave Bautista's first role in a film or not.
I think it was.
He knocks it out of the park.
Absolutely.
And he just cracks me up. I fucking love Drax so much.
Yeah.
We said before how this is a foundational film, and when you look back compared to like the other two, you can see how it's very much foundational. But what makes it work, despite its flaws, is that the movie does just enough to take it over the tropes and to take it over, the very strict 3-act MacGuffin chase adventure story. For a while, Drax is just, as you said, but then when they're on Nowhere, he makes the decision in like a drunken stupor because he just had a fight with everybody, because you got to have the misfits get together, don't get along dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
And he drunkenly sends out a signal to Ronan. It's a stupid thing to do, of course, duh. But because we know he's so focused on getting revenge for the death of his wife and child, that decision feels so, for the lack of a better word, human. And it feels like something he would do in the moment after everything that has happened. It humanizes him so much, and it humanizes the entire movie. In that moment, you really understand who Drax is.
Yeah, because
that is the moment where you understand him as a character.
Up until that point, he was probably the most outsider of the team, and like the team was still finding its footing of like, oh, we actually kind of care about each other and want to work together. But he was the most outsider because, unlike the others, he didn't give a shit about anything except his singular motivation of revenge. Everybody else, Star-Lord and Rocket and Groot, were in it for the money. Star-Lord was also kind of in it just to impress Gamora. Gamora was in it because she wanted to start a new life and to help people throughout the galaxy. But like Drax was solely focused on getting his revenge on Ronan. And at that scene in Nowhere, after his ass kicking from Ronan, he finally realizes that this single-minded drive I have to destruction, the way that it's the same as Ronan's, and it's going to get people hurt and killed along the way. Bystanders are getting hurt. What I did was stupid. I need to go help these people that were helping me in my mission.
The ass kicking and the mistake cracks his shell, makes him understand that like he can't do this because he's going to get more people hurt, and he doesn't want to do that. He doesn't want to contribute to that. Him and Rocket find an understanding because, they fought in the bar. I know we said we wanted to save Rocket, but I guess this is a good segue. Into it. You can tell from movie one that like Rocket is James Gunn's baby, because he's instantly just like a great character that you latch onto. He's your classic sarcastic, smarmy, douchey, selfish jerk of a character, but in that way that all great movies who have these kind of characters do, just you love him anyway, because he's got that one or two little bits of vulnerability that you see that allow you to peek into him and understand him as a person. First is obviously his partnership with Groot, the big tree man who everybody loves. He likes Groot, so therefore you like Rocket more. And him being funny also helps.
Yeah.
And the movie does such a good job of like visually hinting at Rocket's past without exploring it.
Yeah.
When they're all arrested and getting processed, Peter's walking by and Rocket's, he's got like his clothes off and you could see like the plugs and the circuits and the machinery that's like in his back, hinting that something bad happened to him in the past. The first like real dig at emotion where the movie starts to get me is when him and Drax are fighting in the bar and Rocket's got a gun pulled on Drax.
Yeah.
And he's like, he called me vermin. He thinks I'm this stupid thing. He does. And like the pain, the real pain in Rocket's voice.
Yeah. And he's like screaming about how I didn't ask to get torn apart and put back together over and over again. Like all of his douchebaggery just melts away and he's trying to hold on to it, but he's in tears and it's all the facade. And it's a facade. It's so much thanks to the writing, of course, but also Bradley Cooper's voice performance is phenomenal for Rocket. He walks that line of being a gruff jackass who's just snarky and mean all the time, but also has this very tender, soft heart that he's not willing to expose to the world, yet we catch glimpses of it. Bradley Cooper does a phenomenal job of that, but also the visual effects teams for Rocket. Like, it's so hard to create an expressive animal face, and yet everything you see with Rocket, you can read the emotion on his face without it ever feeling uncanny valley, like he's too human. He still looks like a raccoon, but like
that's what's amazing. He's basically just a raccoon.
Yeah.
Like, with a few like flourishes with the design, he is basically just an upright raccoon.
Yeah. And yet there's so much emotion written across his face in every scene. He never seems like neutral or even like inhuman with his responses. Like, to make the comparison, that fucking CGI Lion King, like all of the characters in that had no emotion on their faces because they were these hyper-realistic animals. And I still laugh my ass off at the scene where Mufasa died, because you get baby Simba like pawing at Mufasa like, Dad, wake up, Dad, wake up. And there's just this emotionless, expressionless face on the lion cub. And like, that's not this at all. Like, they've managed to take the base form of a raccoon and put the human expressions over it without losing the animalistic features. And I don't know how they did that.
He's a great example of fantastic visual effects. We take visual effects in movies for granted because they're so ubiquitous now. So it's harder to like really appreciate them when they're done well.
Yeah.
But God, this movie's 10 years old next year.
Still phenomenal.
Jesus Christ, 10 years old next year.
Yeah.
And Rocket still looks fantastic.
Yeah. Like,
and also credit to Sean Gunn, James Gunn's brother. He does all of the motion performance for Rocket on set. The first movie is really good at teasing out backstory to make you understand and endear yourself to the characters without going overboard or like derailing the narrative. It's, again, a real juggling act because the movies go, go, go pretty much for the entire time. But it's always finding ways to make you be like, oh, yeah, I like this guy. I like this girl. I like this character. I like this tree. When they get to nowhere, they're walking through it and, like, this little girl runs up to Groot and he just grows a flower out of his palm and picks it and gives her. It's little moments like that just make these movies a cut above. And even Groot, who's basically mute, all he says is, I am Groot, as we all know. Like, it would be easy for him to just come off as, like, the cute sidekick, you know, without much of a personality or character.
Yeah.
But they find a way to make Vin Diesel as Groot, which is hilarious, because all he really ever says is, I am Groot, in many different ways. Every inflection of I am Groot carries with it a different emotion, a different tone where you understand what he's saying and what he's feeling. And also just through, you know, the animation of the character. You can tell he just kind of wants to, you know, hang out with Rocket. He wants to be friends with everybody. He wants to help out. You can always tell when he's like listening to what's going on, trying to understand. I love the scene where they're trying to talk about how to escape the prison. And Rocket's like, we're going to need this, and we're going to need that. We're going to need a battery, and this special battery that's like 12 foot up in the air. And it's just a locked off shot.
Yeah.
And Groot's listening, and they don't see him walk off into the distance. And he just grows himself tall enough to pull the battery out. And Rocket's like, we're just going to have to improvise, I guess. So, yeah, even Groot feels like a mostly fully realized character in the movie. In a movie with, like half a dozen main characters.
Yeah. Groot is fascinating as a character because, like you said, he's a mostly mute character. He just has those words, I am Groot. He's a fantastic example of being able to project personality onto a sort of blank slate by using cues and visual elements that add so much more depth than, should be there on the surface. Because on the surface, yeah, he's just a big walking plant guy and he's just sort of a mascot for the others. But the way they use his facial expressions, the way he uses his movement, the way that he interacts with the world around him, it lets you project this personality onto him. In this first movie, you get the sense that he's this sort of weird, eccentric loner. Like, he understands the world going on around him, but not enough to know, like, social cues or anything. The first time we see him, he's drinking out of, like, a fountain.
He's just got his mouth just agape as it's just spraying into it.
Yeah. You get the sense that, like, he and Rocket paired off because they're both these weird loners that don't fit in anywhere else in the universe. But even throughout that, even though and in this movie, I think it's at its best because none of the rest of the team besides Rocket understand him. Like, the only person who can speak for Groot is Rocket. So everything we know about Groot comes through Rocket, which we learn more of Rocket's own personality and him having to translate. But we get to see, instead of him being just this big, dumb, hulking tree that sort of wanders around and acts as Rocket's muscle, he's got this very real sort of, I don't want to say, Groot's personality in this first film.
Are you trying to avoid innocence? Are you trying to avoid
I'm
innocence?
sort of trying to avoid innocence because it's not innocence. He's super hyper violent. He's so fucking violent. Like, Groot is so goddamn violent in all of the movies, in each iteration. What he is this sort of caring figure in the way the others aren't. Gamora may
loves his friends.
Yeah, Gamora may be the moral core of this, but in the first movie at least, Groot feels like the emotional core. He's the one who sort of like treats others with more kindness. He's the one who sort of defends people when they need it. Like, there's a point when they're having an argument towards the end over like whether or not they should help the Nova Corps and save Xandar, where like Peter's like, I've got like 12% of a plan, and Groot's like, I'm Groot, and Rocket's like, so what if it's better 11%? What does that have to do with anything? Like, Groot is very protective and caring towards the people he's connected with in a way that, like, sort of inspires the others to be more protective and caring towards each other. And it manifests in the finale with Groot sacrificing himself to save the rest of the Guardians because, like, the ship comes crashing down in the perfect line. The perfect line for this character.
So perfect.
Still hits so hard. We are Groot.
As he swipes a tear away from Rocket, who is being openly vulnerable in a human way for the first time in the movie when he realizes that he's going to lose his friend Groot. And not to take away from the Groot talk, but I wanted to make a final point about Drax and Rocket. After Ronan kicks his ass and leaves, and we're in the aftermath of the Nowhere fight, Drax is apologizing to Rocket, and he's like, I'm sorry, like, I let my pain of my dead family get in the way. And I was like, boo hoo hoo, my wife and kid are dead. Everybody's got dead people.
Yeah.
And like, you think it's callous, and of course it's callous, but like, Rocket's trying to make a point. And I just want to say, every moment with Rocket in this movie hits differently after Volume 3.
Volume 3 recontextualizes Rocket's entire character arc, because we all knew he was a gruff loner who with a tragic past who doesn't want to connect with anybody, but once you see the depths of his trauma, you absolutely need to rewatch the other movies. You can see how what happened in his backstory affects every choice he makes.
Yeah, and it's not often that like telling a backstory later on in like a sequel or a continuation works so well, but we'll get to it. Anyway, back to Groot. When he starts forming his Groot ball around everybody to save them from the crashing ship, and he says, "We are Groot." I was loving the movie. I can still remember seeing this for the first time in theaters almost a decade later.
I do too.
Like, the biggest laugh I think I got was when he goes fucking apeshit.
Oh my god, yes.
When he says that line of bad guys.
Starts thrashing them around while he's yelling, and then he just turns his ass around, looks at Quill and Drax, and just gives them this big goofy grin. He's like, I did good, yeah?
When he's making his ball and he's doing the heroic sacrifice, which I didn't expect because these movies hadn't really gone there yet at this point. I'm like, this movie's amazing.
Yeah.
Like, this is something special. This is really something special because you don't expect one of the characters to die in their first movie.
In Guardians of the Galaxy.
And you don't expect it to be like the cute tree man that you know everybody's going to love instantly. And it doesn't feel cheap. It feels earned because we understand so well who Groot is by the end because of how well the performance is captured by the visual effects. And I can't remember if he was mocapped. I'm sure he was. And the writing of the character. And
it's such a genius turn, too, for the sequels because it establishes the changing of Groot into baby Groot, which having this found family dynamic that's so central to these films, having a character who basically is reset. I think the creators have effectively said the original Groot is dead and this isn't the same Groot from here on out.
Yeah, it's basically a different character.
It's basically a different character. But having this character who is so fundamentally tied to the one we lost in the first movie go through this stage of rebirth and growth, and all the other characters have to help mold them into a new person in the way that like people raise a child. It's so phenomenal the way that they use Groot throughout these films.
The lore of the Power Stone in this movie is you can't touch it, you can't come into contact with it, it's gonna fucking disintegrate you and destroy you. Naturally, to defeat Ronan, they all have to join hands because Quill grabs it and it's killing him. I love another just emotional gut punch that you don't expect, and it just comes out of nowhere. Where Gamora's take my hand, and he sees his mother on her deathbed, and it's just like, ooh,
yeah,
good callback, good full circle character moment here. He's no longer running away from death. He's no longer afraid of it. He's going to do what he needs to do and take the hand.
Yeah,
and it works. It feels earned. They join forces. These misfits, through their foibles, they manage to have enough of a connection to absorb the energy of the Power Stone and defeat Ronan. It's always the little moments like after the action that make everything come together. Rocket sitting there and just holding a twig, just crying that he lost Groot, and Drax, and as we've established, these two have been the most antagonistic towards each other in the movie. Drax just sits down and just pets him, doesn't say a word. And like for a second, Rocket starts and he's like, what the fuck? But he just accepts it. He embraces it and lets Drax comfort him in his moment of pain and sorrow.
It's so good.
These movies are so special.
Yeah, they really are. They're like this first one, even with all of its flaws, it does such a phenomenal job of establishing this is a found family story with wacky, over-the-top hijinks in space, silly characters, but all of them are driven by this shared sense of loss and trauma and pain, and they have come together and learned how to lean and rely on each other to deal with their pain and become better people.
And even the goofiest moments, like Ronan, like, I'm going to destroy you all, and then he's cut off by Quill dancing.
Mm-hmm.
In a lesser movie, that would have just been like, they're undercutting another moment with a joke. But it's not just him doing that because he's a goofball. It's because, what do we know about him? He loves music. He's attached to his music. He tries to connect through people through music and dancing.
And it works because
he uses that.
Yeah, he uses that, and it's because specifically Peter Quill is trying to avoid the seriousness of his trauma and pain by being a goofball. The fact that he undercuts a very serious, intense moment with that is showing how he's weaponized his own need to avoid, like, serious moments. Like, he's learned how to use his own immaturity as a weapon and a tool against others, not just as a way to cope himself. So it fits his character perfectly for him to do, like, a fucking dance-off against a guy who's about to blow up a planet.
Yep. At the end, we get a little bit of exposition from the Nova Corps that maybe the reason Quill was able to hold the stone for so long is that he might not be human.
Mm-hmm.
They've all decided to, stay a team and kind of gallivant around the galaxy and off to the next adventure.
Yeah.
Before we segue into Volume 2, I just want to say that the 3-act set piece is also kind of a problem with Marvel movies.
Yeah.
But I think all 3 Guardians movies avoid it. The atmosphere battle in the skies of Xandar is awesome with the ships. The ship's designs are awesome. It's really cool, just like Star Wars-y space battle stuff. And that juxtaposed with the team fighting Ronan's goons and his ship, the Dark Aster, which is a badass name.
Yeah.
Badass design, too. It's just this big fucking...
this big twisted sort of
horizontal obelisk.
Yeah.
Aesthetically, everything with Ronan is cool as shit. It's just too bad he sucks.
Yeah.
So, the third act action in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 is really good.
And I think it works because in that final battle, there's so many multiple things they're trying to accomplish that makes it more than just beat up the bad guy. Because they want to beat Ronan, they want to kill Ronan, but they're also trying to protect Xandar, get the Infinity Stone back, they have to get through Nebula, they have to do all these different things going on. They also have the looming threat of the Ravagers, who they have a very tenuous alliance with at this moment. There's so many stakes in that final battle that it keeps us from just realizing that this is another, hey, good guys fighting the bad guys to save the world moment.
Yes, that's another thing that James Gunn is able to do in all 3 movies, in my opinion, is create third acts that have a lot of moving pieces that still matter to the story and the characters without it getting lost in digital noise.
Yeah.
Is there anything you wanted to say before we segue?
I just want to preface our discussion of Volume 2 with, when I started our discussion of Volume 1, I said that the first one was probably the most polished overall, and what I meant by that was that I felt like it had probably the most emotional and narrative consistency, in that it wasn't as good as the others in its highest moments, but it didn't feel as jarring in its bad moments. Volume 2 has some of the funniest, best moments in this trilogy, but it's also got some of the weirdest dips in quality. And I think the biggest point with Volume 2 that I have problems with is the comedy. Because when this movie is funny, it's damn funny. But this movie thinks it's a lot funnier than it is, and it tries to shove it down the audience's throat.
Interesting. Because, alright, I'll get into it. When this movie was coming out, of course I was hyped, because I absolutely loved the first one. Everybody did, and it was such a surprise. So there's a lot of hype going into Volume 2. And leaving the theater, I was actually really disappointed. I'm like, that was okay. It just wasn't as good as the first one. It wasn't nearly as good as the first one. I rewatched it again when it hit Blu-ray, and it all clicked. It's like I saw a different movie in the theater. What you just said, a lot of people, that's their biggest point of contention, is that the humor is a lot more inconsistent. I guess we'll get into it later, but I guess I can understand. I don't necessarily agree. But yeah, Volume 2 is definitely a movie that I think suffered from the expectations that the first movie set up, because when that came out, like we said a million times already, it was a huge surprise. Nobody expected it to just be this amazing, charming, out of left field movie. And I think a lot of people just kind of expected to have that same feeling again with Volume 2. Like, how come it didn't, like, just utterly surprise me like Volume 1 did? At this point, we're in Phase 3, and Phase 3 does all of the heavy lifting with the world building across the franchise. So, and I kind of think people kind of expected it to do more than just to be a sequel, which this movie is utterly standalone.
Oh, yeah.
Even more than the first one.
Absolutely.
It's its own thing.
It steps
it's
back.
one of its greatest strengths.
It steps back from the whole Thanos arc. That is really getting ramped up into its, the big finale that we're all pushing towards with Infinity War and Endgame. Like, it was a bold move for this movie to step back and be like, we're not going to focus as much on building up Thanos and the Infinity Stones and whatnot. We're going to focus entirely on this story about Peter and his father.
It's bigger in scale, in like environments and stuff like that, and sets, but it's smaller in scope than the first one. And I just don't think people at first were ready for that.
This one is much more of like a character piece, whereas
it's a character. It's. I'm sorry if I'm railroading you, but I fucking love Volume 2.
I do too. No. Make no mistake. What I just said about the comedy, that was my only main criticism of this movie. I think this movie, when it's at its best, is the best of the trilogy. I like the action, the visuals, like the character work being done here. It's phenomenal in this film, but the comedy is the one sticking point that I have for it.
I need to see Volume 3 a couple more times. I wanted to get it in before this episode, but I just couldn't. Volume 3 might overtake Volume 2, but at the moment, Volume 2 is my favorite of the trilogy and still my favorite MCU movie overall.
Right.
Because it's a character piece.
Yeah.
It's somehow James Gunn garnered enough goodwill with the surprise success of the first movie to convince Disney and Marvel Studios to make a weird, quirky character piece just with Disney money. Like so much of this movie is just the characters talking to each other. He masterfully knows what to do with these characters at this point. Yeah. The way he pairs them off, the dynamics he explores with all of them is just a step above. So just in every regard.
Let's get into some of the character work going on here. The main one being Peter Quill meeting his father, who is Ego, the living planet from the comics. Played by Kurt Russell. He finds out that he is the son of a celestial, basically a god. He is going through this whole arc of, can I trust this guy? Why wasn't he around when my mother needed him? Where was he when I was a child? But also really wanting to have that father figure that was absent during his childhood, because even though he's made steps forward from the first movie in being less of an immature man-child, he's still very much trapped in the traumas of his childhood. Peter Quill's entire arc throughout all of these films is getting past his childhood trauma in different ways. And in this one, it's all about, I didn't have a father figure growing up. I only had my mom, and then I lost her, and that has like what he's even like to have a dad, which is a very classic character arc, but it's done so well with both Kurt Russell and Chris Pratt's performances here. Like, you really believe it. And the fact that Gamora is sort of pushing it along, like I said, it's kind of odd, because I get what they're going for is this sort of like, maybe she also wants to see him have a good relationship with his father because she doesn't have anything like that in her life with her own issues with Thanos. But it's this really genuine sort of, can I trust him? Okay, I'm starting to trust him, but in connecting with my biological family, I'm starting to get pulled away from my newfound family. It does all of this character work, pushing Quill towards realizing what is family. And by the end, we realize it's not his biological connection to Ego. It's his connection through love and shared trauma and codependence, really, with the Guardians.
Yeah, Peter has kind of established himself as the leader of the Guardians. Mm-hmm. There was never a sort of an agreement between them.
Yeah.
As to who was the leader. He just kind of made himself the de facto leader. And he's struggling with that decision he made for himself.
Yes.
He wants everybody to get together and get along and kind of do things his way. But he doesn't have the maturity and the self-realization enough to achieve that yet. Like you said, I really like how he doesn't just fall head over heels for Ego's bullshit immediately. Mm-hmm. He's constantly on his ass, like, most of the time. Like, for, like, that first half of their meeting, he's like, well, how come you didn't do this? Or why didn't you do that? Like, he's constantly questioning it. He's not sure. It's not only until that they're doing that power sharing thing from the Planet Core or whatever, Ego's just like, yes, oh my God, amazing, that Peter finally, like, lets his guard down. He's like, I'm being praised by a parental figure, my real parent, my real father. I finally have.
Unlike Yondu, who threatens to eat him his entire childhood.
Yes. I wanted to save Yondu talk for Volume 2, even though he's in Volume 1.
Yeah.
It was more of a minor element in Volume 1 where, you know, he's had this pirate crew. He was raised by this pirate crew led by Yondu.
The Ravagers.
Yondu, fun character in the first one, played by one of my favorite character actors, Michael Rooker. They have this, like, antagonism. You can tell Yondu's an asshole, and that they've had a very rough, and let's be frank, abusive past. But there's just a little hint that Yondu's a bit softer on Peter than he wants to let on.
Yondu is very much the father figure who doesn't want to admit he's a father figure, and also is trying to toughen up his surrogate child in a universe that he knows is cruel and harsh. Like, what he does to Quill throughout his childhood isn't really, like, it's wrong, obviously, but you get that there's a sense of motivation behind it beyond just, I was purely an asshole. I was an asshole for the sake of being an asshole. I did this, I raised you this way because it's the way I thought you needed to be raised in this cruel and uncaring galaxy.
Yeah, and in the first one, the whole conflict is like, Yondu wants the orb, and he's like, Peter, you like, give me the orb, if you don't, like, kill you. He pretends to give it to him at the end of the first one, and then on Yondu's ship, he opens it up, and it's a troll because Yondu collects little trinkets for his for his control console on the ship, and he just looks at it and, like, he has, like, this knowing smirk. I'd like to think that he knew that Peter didn't give him the Power Stone. That's my headcanon.
Yeah.
When I first saw Volume 2, like, I didn't expect the whole Yondu-ness of this movie.
No, he's so much more important in this one, and like with Rocket and his backstory, getting Yondu's backstory, and specifically his connection with Quill, recontextualizes their whole entire relationship in the first one. Because in the first one, you can see them as sort of extraneous. It's like, hey, this whole, you know, space pirate crew that Quill's hanging with all the time, they're sort of like this extra faction that we didn't really need for the main story to be told. But looking back on it with the context of Volume 2, it totally is necessary to understand Quill's trauma, because not only was Quill traumatized by, you know, losing his mother and whatnot, he was abducted by aliens at a very young age, forced to work as a space pirate, and constantly threatened by them. But now we know that all of those threats, as bad as they were, kinda rang hollow because Yondu always liked him. Beneath the surface, beneath all the abuse and trauma and everything, Yondu genuinely cared about Peter, and it's only here in Volume 2 where he finally has the emotional vulnerability to admit that to Peter by the end of the film.
When I was first watching it in the theater, like, first, I don't know why, like, barely anything on my first viewing connected with me. I don't know why. I was just kind of like, I liked him enough in the first one, but I don't know why I don't know why, like, we have to bring in everybody from the first one. Like, it's just kind of, what's the point? But that's why it benefits so well from repeat viewings, because you wouldn't think that pairing off Rocket and Yondu for most of the movie would be so amazing for them as characters. You wouldn't think pairing off Drax with a new character, Mantis, would be so good for the characters. You wouldn't think the sisterly antagonism between Gamora and Nebula, who Nebula is low-key like one of the best characters in the entire
Absolutely.
MCU. Just gonna say that.
Let me say this: two underrated characters in these franchises, Nebula and Kraglin.
Good old Kraglin.
I fucking love Kraglin. Looking back, he has some of the funniest moments. He has one of the most consistent character arcs throughout these films as well.
Yep, and he's like a third removed character.
He's just this doofus Ravager that was basically Yondu's hot man in the first movie. But yeah, like you said, this movie takes so much of the foundation that was placed in the first one, all these things that were hinted at, all these moving pieces, and starts fleshing them out in what is literally a character piece film. So much of pulling apart and showing how these characters think and work and interact with one another. Yondu and Rocket's a fantastic pairing because Yondu makes this explicit. They're the same character. They're both these gruff loner assholes who want to put up a facade of being tougher and smarter and better than everyone else around them because they're hurt and they can't stand the thought of being hurt again. Nebula and Gamora's arc in this one, where they both act like they hate each other, but deep down they're really just angry over their shared childhood trauma and blame each other instead of the abusive figure who was tormenting them. That's phenomenal.
Yeah, it's so many just disarming moments.
Drax and Mantis is so good because she's a surrogate daughter for him. And oh my god, one of the best acted scenes in this film is where it's so subtle.
I know what you're going to say.
Drax and Mantis are just looking out over these pools in Ego's garden. Mantis has the ability to read other people's emotions. She can feel them if she touches the person. And throughout this whole bit so far, Drax has become more of a goofball. He's sillier. He's starting to let loose around the Guardians. And you start seeing this movie and you think, oh, okay, they're pushing Drax towards more of like the comedic relief. He's sort of, lost his more serious edge. But here he's just looking out over these pools and he's like, you remind me a lot of my daughter. She was innocent. And he's just looking very sort of stoically out over these pools. Mantis looks down at him, touches him. You see her antenna light up the way they do whenever she's reading somebody's emotions. And she just gasps and starts sobbing, not in a full breakdown sob, but just this repressed sadness and pain. And all the while, Drax is just sort of staring forward, not really showing anything on his face, but you can see through Mantis all of the pain still going on inside of him from the continued loss of his child.
It's such a beautiful moment.
It's so good.
It's easy to say that they just made Drax more of a buffoon.
Mm-hmm.
I see it as he's more of himself because his time with the Guardians has allowed him to heal a little bit.
And holy shit, just like with Rocket, Volume 3 recontextualizes Drax's arc.
So, you said repressed. I wouldn't say the pain that Mantis felt was repressed at that moment. It's him just being able to sit with it. It's not his driving factor.
No. I didn't mean it coming from Drax in the sense of repressed, but Mantis could have broken down sobbing in that moment from the pain and sadness that she felt, but instead, when she touches him, it's more like something trying to force its way out of her. She's gasping a little bit. The tears do start sliding, but she's not weeping openly. She's just more it feels more like a pain than just an absolute sorrow.
Yeah. And just the device of using another character to develop using a character to develop another character through is such a brilliant little master stroke.
Mm-hmm.
And Volume 2 is when Drax really won my heart over because he's just a guy and he's just trying to have fun. He's just wanting to have fun.
Yeah.
He's constantly laughing. He's enjoying things around him. The part where Ego makes the bubbles and he loves the bubbles and some people are oh my god, Drax just laughs so much in this movie. And I'm how could you not just love it? And then Batista is just so on point.
He's got
every line delivery is just
he's got this renewed love of life and joy in his heart that if you look at it on the surface, you're okay, they're just pushing him towards comedic relief now. He's the big, loud, dumb doofus and everybody just sort of, plays around him. But instead, like you said, you can see that now that he's gotten his revenge on Ronan, now that he's avenged his wife and child, and is starting to reconnect with the family again, we're seeing more of his true self start to break through. He's not Drax the Destroyer. He's, and this is the bit in Volume 3 that recontextualizes everything, he's Drax the Dad. He's this big, goofy, sort of fun-loving guy who has this very strong sense of connection and protection towards the people in his life. And yeah, you start to see that here. And if you look at it on the surface level, it's like he's just a goofball, but he's not just a goofball. He's bringing more joy to people around him. And there's also a lot of moments where, despite the goofiness of it, he's trying to share his own life wisdom with the others. Like, he has a moment with Peter early on where he's trying to tell him, like, Gamora's not the one for you. There are those who dance and those who don't. And it's a very funny scene, really digging into his whole, like, I saw my wife at one of the war rallies, everyone flailing about. She didn't move a muscle. One might think she was dead. Yes. Like, it's very funny.
My penis would be coming good.
It's very funny, but at the same time, you can tell he's trying to sort of make this connection with Peter and give him some guidance in the way a father would. And it's that same sort of awkwardness.
Love.
Yeah, it's that.
He says it with such love for his wife. He's saying the most ridiculous things, but he doesn't see it as ridiculous because he's not that person. He's just saying it with such love, and that's what makes it work on so many levels.
Mm-hmm. And it has that same sort of awkwardness of, like, the way that a talk with your dad might have, you know? Sometimes your dad means well, but he's just weird, and, like, he's giving you advice that you don't really get. Like, that's kind of what it feels like with Drax in some moments. It's a very real sort of take on, like, yeah, this guy is just doing his best to help the rest of these people feel good and safe and whatnot.
I think an overall view of where the team is at with themselves is needed. We probably should have set that up earlier.
Yeah.
Like we said, Quill is appointed himself the de facto leader, doesn't quite know how to do that because his own ego gets in the way. Drax is just kind of like, he's found his place in the team. Rocket is pushing everybody away because he doesn't know how to deal with being part.
He's scared.
Of
He's terrified.
Found family. He's terrified. Gamora is just trying to be like the mediator and the logical one and the problem solver. And Groot's a baby who doesn't know what the fuck is going on.
Okay.
And they all parent. The movie takes the time to establish that they're all like parenting him in their own ways.
Yes, and it's fantastic. The way that each of them interacts with Groot shows all of their connection to him as a character and as a found family. Because, like, Drax, whenever he's around Groot, it's actually funnier from Groot's end because Groot will stop dancing because he knows Drax hates dancing. Even though, you know, Groot loves to dance, he'll stop dancing so that he doesn't piss off Drax. Rocket is very much trying to teach Groot, and he's very much, you know, making sure Groot's safe all the time. Gamora, like, there's a very cute scene in the opening where she's like, Groot, get out of here, you're gonna get hurt. And, like, he waves to her and she's like, hi. Speaking of that opening scene after the prologue, we get a brief prologue with, like, Peter's mother and Ego while they were on Earth. But that opening scene with that first fight, I think's even better than the one from Volume 1 because it's...
I would have to agree.
It's so well done. They've been sent on this mission to stop this big, crazy space monster with all these tentacles from destroying, like, these batteries, and the whole fight takes place in the background as little baby Groot is dancing to Mr. Blue Sky. It's
that kind of just out of left field charm that these movies excel at. Like, how ballsy is it to set up a big epic opening action scene and not really show you the action because you're watching a little tree baby dance around?
It's all one long sweeping shot following Groot as he's walking around the place just dancing, and in the background you've got lasers going off and this monster roaring, and Drax gets, like, thrown down like 17 times, just, like, getting smashed against the floor, explosions going off. You feel the intensity of this fight. Like, it's this big, intense battle going on, but it's also just this cute little tree guys dancing around having fun, because this is just what we do. We're the Guardians of the Galaxy. We have fun and do crazy stuff like this. And
it sets up where his character's at, too. Like,
he's a little baby who don't know no better. Yeah.
As a person. And it sets up, sort of symbolizes the dynamic between everybody else, you know? It's just that the dynamic between everybody else is all just like this flurry and noise because they're getting used to being around each other. And sidestep, a lot of people I've heard, man, media literacy has just gone out the window. People like, they just repeat the same thing from the first one. In the first one, they don't get along and fight. In the second one, they don't get along and fight. And I'm like, do you people not understand context? Do you not, like, the first one is about learning to come together. The second one is about, okay, we're together now. How do we deal with this?
Yeah.
How do we live with this?
The first one is about finding that connection. The second one is about maintaining it and strengthening it. Yeah. And then the third one is about that connection driving every action we do. Yeah, like the found family trope is all throughout these films, and you see it shape with these characters' arcs, because it's all about connection between these characters, and those connections change and move with the characters themselves.
Shit, I lost my train of thought again. I can get it back.
This movie also, I would say, has some of the best visuals and action. Like that opening scene, obviously, but Rocket in the woods against this Ravagers. It's just this dark, it's like this dark woodland scene. The ship's crashed in the middle of it. All of the Ravagers are like sneaking up on it, and Rocket just starts pummeling them with all these traps he set. He set it like these blow darts to shoot tranquilizers into a bunch of them. He's got these weird gravity mines that like set off things. He's just dodging up through the trees while he's just laughing and playing music and just messing with these guys. Fantastic action scene that shows also how much of a smug prick he is. Yondu's arrow on the Ravager ship whenever they're making their big escape. Like, it's just this... That arrow is one of the coolest weapons in the MCU. Maybe the coolest, because Yondu has to whistle to use it. His head glows anytime it's like being used, and it just leaves this streaking trail of red behind it as it zips and flies in all these weird chaotic directions and just like tears through anything that it touches, like people, metal, ships, anything. That thing can go through anything, and it's such a cool weapon. And they're just sort of like walking around casually on the ship while Yondu whistles and completely destroys the Ravagers.
Well, the mutinous side of the Ravagers.
Yeah, the others were dead.
There's a mutiny.
Yeah,
all his allies were murdered by the assholes by Taser.
Okay, let's touch on Taserface.
You want to get Taserface out of the way?
Because this is my biggest problem, is the comedy. Like I said, when this movie is funny, it's damn hilarious. But this movie thinks it's funnier than it is, and I think the worst moments are the ones where the characters are laughing at their own jokes. The whole Taserface bit is bad. I don't think it's a really funny gag in the first place, where just like we got this weird scarred up faced alien character and he calls himself Taserface for some reason. But they stretch it out so much because Rocket just starts laughing at him and then making fun of him for it. And like, what was your second choice? Scrotum hat? It's just this big long running gag of, oh, this guy's got a dumb name. Oh, this guy's got a dumb name. Oh, this guy's got a dumb name. Isn't it funny? All these other characters are laughing. Laugh along with them, please. There's a lot of moments in this, and Taserface is the worst, where the characters are just laughing so hard at their own jokes that they're making, and it's not really that funny.
I will half agree. I agree that the joke just plays itself out a little bit too long, but I think the setup of the joke is actually a bit more justified on again, repeat viewing, because in the theater, I'm like, my God, yeah, this is not landing. This is a fucking dud. But when taken into context that Rocket's using it to deflect, it's kind of him putting on a performance to stall. And on that character basis, it's a bit more tolerable for me, because I interpret it more than just being like a joke for a joke's sake. It's I agree that it's not really that funny. It does drag on, but it comes from a story point and a character point, which makes it go down easier for me, at least.
I don't know. It didn't work for me. And there's other moments where characters just start laughing at their own jokes and whatnot that they're making, and it just doesn't work. But that's the worst one by far.
Yeah, it is. It could have been better, but I think it does have justification within the story and character to make it go down easy. Oh, but it is followed by one of my favorite jokes in the movie, where Yondu and Rocket are trapped and they've kidnapped Groot and made him part of the crew and gave him his own little jumpsuit. And they're beating him up and torturing him. And it's so sad and fucked up. And he's just like, he's so dejected. And but Yondu's like, hey man, you got to get my prototype fin.
Yeah, and then Groot just goes and gets everything.
Extended scene of just like everything that's not the fucking fin,
including a severed human toe.
Cracks me up every time.
That is a good gag.
It just smash cuts to him holding a human toe, like, huh? Mm-hmm. And Rocket's just like, please tell me you have like a refrigerator of severed human toes on the ship. And he's just like, no. And he's like, God damn it. And then like the joke, like this is an extended joke that succeeds in like being extended in that it starts off funny, drags out, and then circles back around to being funny again, because you finally think Groot is going to get the fin because he's in the right room. He sees it in the drawer and he's like, and then he gets something that's right next to it.
Yeah.
Not the fin.
And then Kraglin finally steps in, which let's talk about Kraglin. I mentioned him earlier. Kraglin is both really, really, really funny as a character for the little bits that he gets, but also his character journey is so clearly established. First movie when we see him, he seems to be sort of like Yondu's right-hand man. There's not much to him. He just sort of like hops up the captain anytime the captain's trying to do something. But here in the second...
Captain's gonna say stuff.
Yeah, the captain's got to say stuff. But here in the second one, we see him start questioning Yondu and everything. Like the scene where the Ravagers have got Rocket surrounded, they all think, hey, we're going to capture Rocket and lure in Peter and get our revenge and also get all this money. But Yondu says, no, we're not going to do that. We're just going to sell these batteries, which aren't worth as much. But at this point, Kraglin's like, that's not fair, Captain. It ain't right. You let Peter get away with anything, but you wouldn't do the same for us. That ain't fair, Captain. And like, it's this genuine moment of him feeling betrayed by Yondu and thinking that Yondu is making the wrong decision, but he accidentally gets tied up in the mutiny, you know? A mutiny occurs, Yondu loses his thing that lets him control the arrow on his head, and they all get tied up, and so many of the Ravagers get killed, all the ones that were still supporting Yondu, and when Kraglin comes back around to Yondu, like, he has this really soft, innocent moment where he gives him the fin, where he's like, they killed all my friends. And it's this very soft, subdued performance, but you can feel the pain of him being like, I didn't realize that me speaking up, standing up for myself once was going to do this. I didn't realize it was going to destroy our entire way of life. And from that point on, you see him trying to uphold the legacy of Yondu. Even after this movie, when Yondu dies, he's trying to uphold Yondu's legacy out of this mixed sense of like guilt, but also pride in who Yondu was and what the Ravagers were. Kraglin has this absolute arc from being just the hype man into betraying Yondu, into redeeming himself, into trying to uphold legacy, and it all works so well. Uh-oh, did I lose you? Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Sweet, okay, we'll cut out all that dead air. Where'd I lose you?
You were just talking about Kraglin living up to Yondu.
Yeah, there's just this very clear arc throughout all the films of Kraglin as being the loyal follower to betraying him, not sort of unintentionally betraying Yondu, to redeeming himself, to trying to uphold Yondu's legacy.
Yes, and
he's damn funny.
He's very funny.
Like, I love that bit where like he's asking Nebula like, "What are you gonna do with your share of the money?" And she goes on this long rant about how she's gonna hunt down Gamora and then Thanos and use every weapon in the galaxy to destroy her father. And he's just like, "Yeah, I was thinking more like a pretty necklace or a cool hat, something to make the other ladies go, ooh, that's nice."
Kraglin is just another example of how far Gunn takes the characters. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know like what kind of crack he took to like understand how to make everybody work.
Yeah.
But he did. And oh God, who to even talk about next? I guess we could circle back around to Ego, Peter, and Yondu again.
Yeah.
Or do you want to wait for last and then first to do Gamora and Nebula?
Let's do Gamora and Nebula. I feel like we can knock this one out pretty quick.
Okay. I think Gamora is a much stronger character in this one.
Yes.
She's let her guard down like everybody else has except for Rocket, where she's still kind of like the stern one, the badass one, but you can tell she lets Peter in more. And like he's like the only one that she's allows herself to be vulnerable with. You can tell that she really kind of wants to fix things and kind of like be the problem solver, even though she doesn't know how, which I like because, you know, she comes from this tragic abusive relationship and this terrible thing with her sister where they were pitted against each other, and I like how that doesn't manifest with like her being standoffish and not wanting to connect. I like how it manifests with her like, okay, this is a second chance, so I'm not gonna let what happened with Thanos carry over into this and burden that and make me be cynical about it.
She almost wants to make her relationship with the other Guardians work as a way to sort of spot her relationship with Nebula and Thanos, because they capture Nebula pretty early on and she's super like standoffish and mean towards Nebula. Like Nebula asks for that like yarrow root or whatever, and like
it's not right.
Yeah, Gamora's like, it's not right. Also, I hate you. Like she doesn't show any kindness towards her sister until they have their big clash at the end of Act 2, where Nebula literally comes screaming out of the sky with a freaking Ravager ship, using every single gun on the ship to try and blow Gamora up as she's running through this empty field, and then crashes it into a cave, trying to destroy Gamora out of this pure hatred and spite. And Gamora is just running for her life, and they finally have their cathartic moment where like they finish their fight, they're both worn out, and Nebula is like, I beat you, say I won, I beat you. And Gamora refuses to admit it, and she's like, he kept tearing me apart and you never let me win once. Like, Nebula is so hurt from the fact that this person who she spent her entire childhood with never gave her the opportunity to win, and she knew the consequence of her failure, because Nebula was literally torn apart by Thanos and replaced with cybernetics to make her better. And
yeah, she's basically a cyborg because of the horrendous abuse that Thanos put her through her entire childhood.
And she's blaming Gamora for it, because even though Thanos was the one who did it, Gamora could have let her win at some point and, you know, spared her some of that trauma, but she didn't. And by the end, we realize that Gamora makes a great point. It's like, I was a little girl too. I was a child just trying to make it to the next day. We both did what we had to survive.
Yeah, it says so much just about how that kind of, you know, parental trauma that an abusive parent can, you know,
can pit people against each other
in their children, and it manifests, unfortunately, in hatred and animosity between the siblings when it should be directed at the parent. Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, that's all they knew. All they knew was fighting each other, because that's all Thanos, you know, that's all he did with them. And when she says, when Nebula says, all I wanted was a sister, like, all you wanted to do was win and all I wanted was a sister, that's just like needle drop.
Yeah.
Boom. That's like the second big chest punch in the movie.
Yeah.
First was Mantis touching Drax and having that cry. Second was I just wanted a sister. Boom. And like, you can tell that's like Gamora's come to Jesus moment.
Yeah.
She's just like, oh my God.
Yeah,
I get it now. It was the Danny DeVito in that It's Always Sunny episode for Gamora.
Yeah, and it was the moment that really endeared me to Nebula as a character. Like, this is not
love Nebula.
This is not just another gruff asshole in this galaxy. This is another incredibly hurt person acting on their trauma in the way that they know how.
And Karen Gillan just puts so much into it.
Oh, absolutely.
She's under all these prosthetics, completely covered. And like, she conveys like so much intensity and emotion. Mm-hmm. Even though she could kill me with a snap of her finger, I just want to give her a hug. I just want to be like, oh, Nebs, come here. Let me give you a hug.
There's this seething anger in everything she says. And you can tell that under that anger is a layer of hurt.
Just so much. Yeah, like these movies are so good at like taking these gruff assholes who mostly aren't really good people and just exposing the nerve of their humanity under, what they present. Mm-hmm. Like, because again, in lesser movies, a character like Nebula would just come off. She could be annoying. She could be one note, but every like venomous thing she says, there's that undercurrent of her abuse and her pain. Like, that's just how she knows how to cope and work through life, because that's all she's ever known. When like she's like shown like softness and tenderness, there's something about like her black contacts, her all black eyes, that just like make her look like a puppy dog or a deer in headlights.
Yeah,
and like
it's imposing when she's angry, but when she's uncomfortable or unsure, there's this like weakness that you see in those eyes that makes her so vulnerable looking.
And how darkly poignant is it that this character is literally just like wants to find wholeness when her body, it's just this amalgamation of just parts. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When your body is just parts that have been torn off and put back together, how can you be a whole person?
Classic.
It might sound like an obvious trope or a cliche trope. It is,
but it works.
It works so well. And I love visually that whole scene, because Gamora, she realizes that Peter is being sold a bill of goods by Ego, even though she was originally on board with it, but she knows what a manipulative father is, and so she's caught wise. So she's like fed up of everybody's bullshit because she just had a fight with Peter. He's like, I got a daddy now. Bleh, why do you want to take this away from me? And like, the shot is like asymmetrical. She's just like sitting off to the side in this field, stewing, and like these like two reeds are just like,
yeah.
And like, she just like swords them in half.
Yeah.
And then you hear the Nebula ship just in the distance, just
it's such a good shot.
The visuals, the shot design, the sound design, everything.
Oh my god,
is just so good.
All of these movies have a fantastic soundtrack and use them phenomenally. I think Volume 2 does the best with it, though. Like,
how did we not talk?
I know,
about the
have we not
soundtracks?
at this point? Like, all of these movies, fantastic soundtracks, pop songs from like the 80s and everything, all tied to Quill's childhood. But like, this one in particular,
Volume 2 is definitely the apex of the soundtracks.
That opening with Mr. Blue Sky sets a perfect tone for that action scene. The chain is used here in an early scene where the Guardians are like sort of separating and there's a lot of tension between them. And then when they come back together for the big battle in the finale and Peter finally chooses them over Ego, using the chain again to show the reconnection is flawless,
just
musical
stand up
scoring.
And cheer, pump your chest, just and even the songs that are just meant to like be like
Southern Nights
juxtaposition.
Southern Nights during Rocket's
Southern
battle
Nights.
in the woods is fantastic. Like, it's just a perfect use of the music.
Wham Bang Shangalang when the Sovereign, the gold people, which
Brandy,
awesome tie-in in Brandy
is thematically used. The lyrics of Brandy are used thematically throughout the entire movie by Ego. We haven't talked about Ego enough as character yet. We've talked about his connection with Quill, but like this is one of the better MCU villains, and the big
massive step up from Ronan.
Absolutely, and the big reason is because he has a genuine connection and reason to interact with the protagonists. Like, he's Quill's father, and he genuinely wants Quill to join him on this mission he has. He's another genocidal maniac, like most of the villains are, but, like, he genuinely wants his son to join him in this and to get along with him. The conflict isn't just good guy versus bad guy now. It's like two conflicting ideologies, one of them obviously wrong, but the people involved in it are connected in a way that makes their conflict personal.
Ego, just like every member of the Guardians, you know, he's dealing with
isolation,
a sense of isolation, a sense of place, loneliness. He explains to everybody how he was lonely for so long because, you know, he describes how he just kind of came into being and like just like was a consciousness for like eons, and then learned how to like control matter and himself and become the celestial body. His overall like goal, again, is very, very simple, very comic book, but at least you understand it and it makes sense and it has thematic purpose that's explored, unlike Ronan. Kurt Russell is just, I'll watch anything Kurt Russell does. As an audience member, you know 99.9% that like Ego's going to turn out to be an asshole.
Yeah.
It's not supposed to be like a moment when he reveals himself. You're just waiting for that shoe to drop.
But there is a moment in this.
But
the envelope that they push.
Before we get to that, though, I love picking up on things I didn't notice before. Just this past watch I did, I think was the 4th time I've seen the movie. When he's trying to get Peter to get in touch with the planet, which is Ego. Ego is the planet.
Yeah.
And Peter's able to do it. Ego just lets out this like really like just yes,
a wild wild elation, like completely. He's like, oh my god, finally.
And when you figure out what everything is and when it clicks together, that's not like a yes, oh my god, my son did it, yay boy. It's, oh my god, finally I found the one that is able to handle what I want them to do.
Yeah.
It's a sinister yes. And we're not quite sure why it is yet. And and the payoff of that is so good. Because
he's another genocidal maniac. He wanted connection. He felt isolated and lonely, so he sought out life. And when he found it so disappointing.
Yep.
And
he says that.
Yeah,
exactly.
His exact words, because he sees life as something beneath him. So when he realizes, hey, this didn't give me the fulfillment I wanted, let's fix that by making the entire universe me. You suddenly realize that, like, oh, his entire interactions with Peter wasn't him trying to connect with someone that should be close to him. It was him trying to mold his son into someone he wants him to be. Another manipulative parent in this galaxy full of them.
If Peter wasn't able to handle the connection, though, he would have ended up like the thousands of corpses that Gamora and Nebula find in the cave after their fight.
Yeah. Which also contextualizes Yondu's actions from the past few films. Yondu was the one who had been delivering these children, and he didn't realize that Ego was just killing them left and right.
Let's get into it, because
let's get into the big finale. The big shoe drop moment. We're realizing, okay, Ego's evil. He's crazy. He's mind controlling Quill at this point. He's shown him some sort of vision of basically infinity, and Peter has lost his grip on reality, his connection to everything except this vast, infinite world. And Ego lets it slip that he's the one who killed Peter's mother. And I remember sitting there in theaters and gasping out loud when I heard that, because I knew he was going to be evil from the start. We all knew Ego was going to be evil, but for that scene from the first film to have all been because Ego was a petty bitch who didn't want to go back to Earth. Ego was starting to feel genuine feelings for a mortal person, and he's like, I can't do that. I'm a killer.
Yep.
That,
and like he doesn't say like, and that's why I killed your mom. Like he offhandedly says it because he feels like, because he's got Peter in the palm of his hand. Peter's like on that brink of just like completely going to the other side, and he's just offhandedly like, and that's why it killed me, to put that tumor in her head. And James Gunn does a dolly zoom, which is where it's the Jaws shot. Yeah. It's where you zoom the camera lens in while you physically pull the camera back. That creates like that disorienting look. That whoop. And like, it's so cool because at this point in the movie, you forget that Quill's kind of a badass and a hothead. Yeah. Like, even though he was completely under Ego's spell and like about to get lost, you said you killed his mom.
And then like his eyes
snaps him out of it immediately, and he just starts blasting.
He just starts blasting, blows Ego's mortal form to pieces. Oh god. Ego's also just such a fun villain because of the way his powers work. Like, you can literally tear his body apart. As long as the planet's core is fine, he's just gonna get right back up. Like, there's no stopping him. And the way his body regenerates too, where it's like just a floating nervous system, and then like muscle and bone starts to grow back over it, and the skin peels back over. Like, it's so like grotesque and cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. Kurt Russell pretty much mostly disappears from the third act after they destroy his human form. It's really cool and kind of daring to like keep the villain as we've known him off screen and only represent him through like different like formations that he takes. That's really cool. I love that choice because he'll take like form of like rocks, or like he'll put his face in something. When he comes back as like the nervous system, that's a pure like Watchmen Dr. Manhattan move. Yeah. Pretty unnerving. Yeah. No pun intended, unnerving. Yondu. This whole movie, this trilogy really is about parents and fathers and them fucking you up and fucking you over and doing right by yourself and others moving forward.
It's about the pain and healing that family allows for, whether that's be your biological family or your found family.
When we're introduced to Yondu again in the beginning of the movie, he's at a robot brothel. The Ravengers come and like they pretty much kick him out. And Sylvester Stallone in an extended cameo, he's like, "You Ravengers don't deal in kids, you know, you broke the code." And like, we kind of don't know what he's talking about. I guess we know it's about Peter.
No, we know it's about Peter because
we know it's about Peter.
Later on, they explain that it's about all those kids he was giving to Ego.
Well, yeah, I meant like at that moment.
Yeah, okay,
yeah, and that sets up, you know, Yondu's vulnerability and his catalyst for change. And with him being laid low by the Ravengers and connecting with Rocket, I love that whole speech he gives Rocket, you know, like you push everybody away because you're afraid, you know, if you feel a little bit of love, you know, you're gonna just be reminded of how big that hole in you is, you know. I know who you are, boy. You're me. And like, I just love Michael Rooker. He delivers every line like a fucking champ.
Yeah.
I don't consider it a redemption when he decides to go and rescue Peter with Rocket. It's just a guy who knows he fucked up and is gonna try to do right at least this one time.
You literally just described a redemption.
That's not a redemption.
Yeah, it's literally a redemption. Is someone who does something wrong and then atones.
Well, see, you're talking about atonement, not redemption.
Okay.
There's a difference.
Okay,
anyway.
Describe the difference for me, Mr. Thesaurus.
I'm not going to describe the difference because I feel like we've dug myself into a hole here.
Yeah, because you know you're wrong. He's literally having a redeeming moment.
No.
Whether or not he's can be considered a good person by the end of this movie is an argument that we could have. That's a whole moral debate.
Okay, that's what I meant to say.
You can say he's still not a good person by the end of that film.
Yes.
That's fine. But he is redeeming himself in the fact that he's trying to undo the pain that he's caused.
Yes, okay. During the fight, Peter's mask that allows him to breathe in space gets busted. Mm-hmm. And
got one spacesuit and one jetpack.
One that Rocket gives him. Everybody else is taking off, getting the hell out of there because they managed to blow up Ego's planet brain. It's all coming down. Peter's just kind of like stuck there.
Before we get to that moment, I do want to say I love that last line, that last exchange between Ego and Peter, because literally the planet's falling apart. Groot blew up the bomb, and like Ego is like there begging Peter. Actually, it's right before the bomb goes off. Like Ego is fighting against Peter. Peter can still control the planet because he learned how, and he's been basically holding Ego off from stopping the bomb from being detonated. And Ego grabs him by the shoulders and is begging him at this point. He's like, if you do this, you'll just be another mortal. You'll just be human. And Peter says, what's so wrong with that? And Ego just screams as the bomb goes off because
that wasn't how I wanted it to go.
He cannot conceive the idea that being a regular person, being a regular life form is enough. He's so wrapped up in literally his own ego that he cannot fathom living as a mortal.
Yeah.
Perfect death for him.
Great final line from Peter there as he defeats his biological father. Mm-hmm. But yeah. It might have been his father, but I'll get to
yeah, they're flying up. They're trying to get out of the exploding world.
No. Let me go through it. Because it makes Erica cry every time because she loves Michael Rooker like I do. Mm-hmm. And makes me cry every time too now. He tells Rocket go on, you got to give me this. I haven't done anything right in my whole damn life. And Rocket's like, all right, man. And he gets on the ship, and then Yondu finds him, puts the breather on Peter's head, flies him up into the atmosphere. This is when Peter realizes that there's only one breather, and Yondu's probably going to die. Just Yondu looks at him, and he just, from his heart, just sincerely tells him I'm sorry, I didn't do any of it right. I'm damn proud you're my boy, and freezes in space and dies as he's touching Peter's face tenderly as Peter breaks down and cries. Mm-hmm. It gets me every time. It's so.
And then it's followed by this beautiful funeral scene. First, the Guardians are all gathered together. Peter's finally having this realization that as bad of a father that Yondu was, he did teach him everything he knows. He did raise him, and in his final moments, he realizes he did have sort of a kick-ass dad for all his flaws, and Yondu is sent out into space in this, I think they send him out through one of the engines or something, because these colorful flames are all swirling around the body, and all of the Ravagers show up. Rocket contacted them to let them know what they did, and all of the Ravagers start setting off these fireworks in Yondu's memory, and as the Guardians are all standing there watching this funeral for Yondu, they all have their character arcs in this film tie together, because Rocket's standing there watching all of these people, and he's like, they did come. His friends did come, even though he was a jerk, and even though he stole batteries he didn't needed, and explicitly
because Rocket stole some batteries from the
Sovereign at the beginning. Yeah, it ties all of his stuff together. We see Drax and Mantis. Mantis is they've had this cute little bickering back and forth where Drax kept calling her ugly. It's really funny. And she's one of the cutest designed characters. I love the way Mantis looks, but he's always called her ugly throughout the movie, and she's just staring at the fireworks and she's like, it's beautiful, and Drax is like, and so are you. on the inside. Peter and Gamora finally had like hold hands and share that unspoken thing that they've been talking about, their connection that's gotten stronger throughout the film. They're starting to finally realize their romance is something more. Yeah, everything just ties together as the Ravagers. Fucking Kraglin! Kraglin sees the Ravagers come and he just starts screaming in like elation. He pounds his chest with like the Ravager like salute. It's just, he's tearing up. It's beautiful.
It's this beautiful extended just funeral and eulogy scene, and the fact that it's over Yondu.
Yeah.
You know, a character that's in the comics, you know, D-list at best. Yeah. But this is where adaptation, you know, shows how strong it is, because if you're just thinking in terms of like character popularity or relevance,
yeah,
be like, man, how come Yondu gets like this big, glorious, magnificent, emotional death and not this person or that person? Like, because that's not what it's about. That's not how you tell stories, you know. And the fact that Yondu's death is like this linchpin, not just in the Guardians trilogy, but in the entire MCU, as like one of the most heartfelt, human, beautiful moments, is just a testament to how good these movies are. And Yondu as a character, I like how he's an alien, but like he's played with kind of like this like good old boy sort of like
southern charm. Yeah.
Like just that line, he might have been your father, boy, but he wasn't your daddy. It's so good.
He really does have that sort of southern boy charm, like just a good old boy. Like he's got those crooked ass teeth too, like just the total roguish type.
And when the whole Mary Poppins y'all thing.
Oh, God, I love that joke.
It's just, you look like Mary Poppins.
Was she cool?
I don't know who the fuck that is.
He's like, was she cool?
Was he cool? Yeah. I'm Mary Poppins, y'all. Just the way he screams, I'm Mary Poppins, y'all, with such confidence.
It's so
just
good.
Like, fuck yeah, I'm Mary Poppins.
Yeah.
I'm connecting with my boy here. I'm Mary Poppins.
Volume 2 is fantastic.
Just thinking about Father and Son, the Cat Stevens song that plays over the end of Volume 2 during Yondu's funeral.
Yeah.
Probably my favorite needle drop in the trilogy.
God, it's such a good use of music. Like they all are, but Volume 2 I feel like hits it the hardest.
There are so many things that pay off and connect and stuff. Like there's so much stuff I know I'm forgetting, but it's just the nature of talking about stuff you love.
Dude, we've been going for 2 hours on this one. Like,
I know.
There's so much that we could, and we still got a whole third ass movie and some spin-off stuff. We need to hit the spin-off stuff kind of as quick as we can, at least.
Easy peasy.
So first off, the big one, Infinity War. Infinity War does a lot with the Guardians. I kind of just realized, good God, Tyler, Jesus.
Excuse me.
God. Anyway.
It was a beer burp.
Yay. Fucking hell. Fucking guy. Do you know how many burps there are throughout Tongue? Like, I constantly hack and wheeze, and you're just burping throughout all of Tongue and Geek.
We're quite disgusting.
We're disgusting, gross monsters. I don't know why anyone would listen to this podcast.
We're getting more views lately, though, so that's good.
Oh, God. And it's always when I'm trying to make a point that you burp so I can't cut it out. It's like perfectly timed to be in there. Anywho.
And you say I'm not a good comedic partner.
Mm-hmm. Anywho, Infinity War. I kind of had this realization recently. Thanos is more of a villain to the Guardians directly than he is to the Avengers. Like, he's set up throughout all of these films to be this big looming threat that's on its way, but it's specifically the Guardians that make him the biggest one because of his connection to Gamora and Nebula, but also he's been discussed as like this galactic level threat, universal level threat to all life in those movies in particular, whereas the Avengers really don't know anything about him until he shows up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's why Endgame annoys me with some of the payoff it lacks, but we won't get into that. But as for what they do with the Guardians, I think they're mostly handled well. Of course, this is... You could be argued like this is Thanos's... Well, it is Thanos's movie.
Infinity War absolutely is.
he has the most screen time of anybody, so it's his movie. It's also Gamora's movie. Mm-hmm. More than Tony's, more than Steve's. It's actually Gamora's movie, which is really
needed at this point.
It's needed and applauded, even though I'm not the biggest fan of either Infinity War or Endgame. Kill me now, MCU fans, comic book movie fans. I think they kind of did a disservice to Star-Lord, but they did really right by Gamora, Rocket, and Nebula in these two movies.
How so with Star-Lord? Is it his whole he accidentally killed all the life on the universe that everybody complains about?
Yeah, I'm kind of one of those people that doesn't like it because even though it's technically in character,
it's absolutely in character. Tyler,
I kind of feel like he should be beyond that at this point.
No, Tyler, okay, let's have this argument because everybody points out the fact that Star-Lord screws everything up. They had the Infinity Gauntlet almost off, and then Thanos reveals that he killed Gamora to get the Reality Stone. And Star-Lord goes off, starts beating on Thanos, and it's just enough to let Thanos snap out of Mantis's control and regain control of the fight, and he ends up winning. This was absolutely the wrong choice to make from a strategic standpoint.
Well, yeah, I know that.
He is not, like, for a character motivation, what Star-Lord has been going through his entire time in all of these films is reconnecting to people on a deeper level than just this sort of superfluous, casual thing that he's been doing as a sort of his own interpretation of an action hero. His relationship with Gamora is the first mature, reasonable relationship he's had with a woman. The first person he's truly loved, and he's lost that. And every time we've seen Star-Lord lose someone or someone threaten the people he loves, he goes apeshit. Just like he did on Ego in the last movie when he finds out that Ego killed his mother. The first thing he does is pull out his guns and start fucking blasting. You cannot expect in a character who is driven by his emotional connection to others and his need for love and family, when he loses the most important person in his life, you can't expect him to act rationally. Of course he's gonna fucking lose it. He's done that every other time, and he's not grown to the point of not caring about people or being more rational. He's gained emotional growth.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't like absolutely hate it. I just kind of wish they found a way around it is all. I don't think the whole like dick measuring contest with Thor is funny. That's actually my bigger contention than him beating Thanos over the head.
That's fair.
As they're getting the gauntlet off.
That's fair.
That is more annoying to me than him beating up Thanos. And this is my pettiness coming out. I hate that good character work was done outside of the trilogy. The trilogy can't stand alone completely all by its own. It needs that context.
The third one is more reliant on knowing A, Infinity War and Endgame, and also B, that little bit in the holiday special with Mantis. It's more of a dependent film than the other two. The first one was foundational, and you didn't really need to know going in the rest of the MCU yet. Although it was following that same formula, it wasn't necessarily... You didn't have to know what was going on Earth with the Avengers or whatnot to enjoy it. The second one was absolutely its own standalone story that was like, we're not even going to touch Thanos and whatnot. We're going to focus completely on this new arc. The third one becomes dependent on understanding what happened with Infinity. Like everything else that happens post Endgame, it relies on you understanding Endgame.
Yeah. The third one can mostly stand on its own, unfortunately, except for the Quill Gamora dynamic.
Which is like the secondary plot point in this, aside from Rocket. It's like the second main through line.
And I just want to say I am vindicated in that James Gunn said he personally, if he had his choice, he wouldn't have killed off Gamora. He gave them their blessing, but he wouldn't have done it. But I won't be petty and annoying about that too much. Anyway, so because of all the machinations that's happening with Thanos, he's finally here. Everybody's coming together for the big team up, and same movie, the lead up to Infinity War, the biggest crossover event, and blah blah blah. They now know that Thanos has the stones, and Gamora is scared shitless. They plan on going to meet him to hopefully kill him. because she finally confesses her love for Peter, and they're finally at that level with each other, she says, if this doesn't go the way we want it to, I want you to kill me. I want you to not hesitate, and I want you to kill me. And, like, that's not, like, said in, like, some, like, cool, badass, like, warrior, like, do it for the mission way.
Mm-mm.
That's her being as vulnerable as she possibly can be.
Because she is terrified
out of love.
She is terrified
out of love for Peter.
Mm-hmm. She's
pretty much.
She's terrified on multiple levels. She's terrified, A, that she's going to be the one responsible for Thanos taking over the galaxy and getting what he wants, or the universe and getting what he wants. B, she's terrified of being back under Thanos' control again. She's back to being that scared little girl who's fighting for her life. And C, she's terrified that, like, Peter's going to have to live with the pain of knowing that he was responsible for her death, but she was willing to overlook that last one over the other two, which shows, like, she's still not perfect. Despite all the growth that she's made, she's still willing to force Peter to put himself into that situation because of how much she's afraid of Thanos.
Yeah, it's fucked because she loves and trusts Peter enough at this point to ask him to kill her if Thanos gets his way. And, you know, Peter, you know, he was a pirate, you know, a bit of a mercenary, you know, he reluctantly, out of love for her and some understanding of the threat that they face, agrees. They go to... Is it Nowhere?
Yeah.
Where the collector was?
It's the collector's place in Nowhere, yeah.
They go to Nowhere to confront Thanos. Quill's like, don't pop off, guys. Stay behind. We don't know what we're running into. Drax sees his opportunity, attacks, but, you know, Thanos, he's got the stones, and one of them manipulates reality, turns, like, Drax into cubes or whatever, Mantis into ribbons.
Yeah.
Can't do anything. And what a bastard. He fakes out, letting Gamora think that he stabbed him and ended his life. And the whole thing was a fucking projection. Was fake. And turns Peter's reluctant bullets into bubbles as he goes to...
Yeah, Peter does it. Peter goes through with it.
Yeah, he goes through with it. He was gonna kill her. Which, ouch.
And Thanos, it's been a while since I've watched Infinity War, but once he does that, doesn't he say, I like you, before he takes Gamora? Because, like, I think he was...
like that, yeah.
Because of how far Peter was willing to go, like, he's like, I like you. And then he takes Gamora, and it's such a spit in the face.
Yeah, and every scene with Gamora sort of confronting Thanos about what a fucking monster piece of shit he is.
Because it also ties together her relationship with Nebula, too. Because Nebula has been caught by Thanos again, and he's literally got her disassembled, hovering in midair. Her entire body, piece by piece, stretched out, and she's just screaming in agony as Thanos is tormenting her. Gamora is finally like, okay, fine, I finally care about somebody enough that I will tell you where the last stone is.
It's some of Zoe Saldana as the character's best work. Because she's not afraid. Well, I mean, she's afraid, but, like, once he has her, like, she's not gonna hold back. So they're on Vormir, I think is the planet where the Soul Stone is. And ghostly apparition Red Skull.
Yeah, for some reason. For still unexplained reasons.
To attain the stone, you must sacrifice something you love.
Which, I saw somebody bring this up. The fact that Steve Rogers has to be the one to go back in time and return all the stones to where they came from. Like, there must have been a very awkward reunion when he was giving back that one. The Soul Stone.
Oh, hey, man. Haven't seen you since WWII.
Still a Nazi?
Sucks to be you. Gamora thinks that, he finally lost. Thanos finally loses because he doesn't love anything. But, and this is kind of like a quote-unquote problematic aspect of the movie for some people.
Yeah.
Because they don't think that Thanos' idea that, or thought that he loves Gamora should actually translate into love. It's what you read into it, you know, like, we don't know what this fucking soul stone perceives as love. Like, can it filter out what parental unabusive love is? Can it filter out platonic love, romantic love? Maybe in Thanos' mind, like, what he did to her did translate as love. And it shows maybe the stone like extrapolates what the person seeking the stone truly feels is love. Yeah. Not like a judgment of what good love versus bad love is.
It's also important to note that Thanos is the mad Titan. He's insane. His literal mission is to wipe out half of the universe so that the other half can thrive, which is insane. Like,
very much so.
People always mock Thanos, like his plan makes no sense. Yeah, of course it fucking doesn't. He's not nuts. The what's so good about Infinity War is showing the absolute lengths of his madness he's willing to go to fulfill his insane mission. And in his own insane way, the way he tormented Gamora and Nebula, the way he destroyed their homeworlds and stole them from their families, that is his mad form of love. It's not real love. It's not a genuine love and care for someone's needs, but it's his maddened view of love.
Yeah. If he believes it's love, so therefore the Soul Stone accepts it because he believes it. Well, didn't say, but he throws her off the cliff.
Yeah.
She's dead. And that's pretty much the big developments.
For Infinity War. With Endgame, real briefly with Endgame, Gamora is brought back not with the stones and not the real Gamora, but through time travel shenanigans. They bring her her meeting the Guardians, like right before she would have met the Guardians. They bring that Gamora back from the past. And then after all of the events in Endgame, beating Thanos and whatnot, that Gamora is still out there in the new timeline. So it's a Gamora who never met the Guardians, who never had any connection to them. She runs off and does her own thing because she doesn't fucking know these people. She doesn't want anything to do with them. But Peter,
kind of like Groot in Volume 2 after Volume 1, functionally a new character.
Mm-hmm. And of course, Peter's still obsessed with her because this was the love of his life. And oh my gosh, she's suddenly back, but she isn't really. And that's what the whole arc with them is in Volume 3: is this conflict of like, I'm not the person you knew. I'm someone totally different.
Rocket and Groot go with Thor for Thor to forge Stormbreaker because he lost Mjolnir in the movie we won't mention. That's some good stuff. I like that. Thor's probably at his best in Infinity War, I think.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about Thor, though. Let's focus exclusively on Guardians.
I'm talking about Rocket and Groot a little bit. It's cool that the tech guy, Rocket, goes on, like, the tech... It's not really tech, but, the...
Magic weapon.
The forging quest magic weapon with Thor. Mm-hmm. And I like how Groot gets a little something to do by making the handle on the hammer. That's cool.
Yeah.
Nebula's around, but she's mostly getting tortured and left behind on Titan in Infinity War. Endgame's more her movie. Legit, like, the opening moments with just her and Tony on the ship floating in space are intense. Some of the best parts of that 3-hour movie.
So intense because they're both 5 minutes. They're running out of oxygen. They're running out of food. They're just basically waiting to die in that spaceship. And their cute little interactions where they're just sort of
cute.
They're just sort of comforting each other in what they think is their final moments after their immense failure. It's so powerful.
And Endgame is when I really fell in love with Nebula as a character. Mm-hmm. Because at this point, I hadn't really been swayed on Volume 2 yet because I hadn't watched it since it came out. Mm-hmm. Just Karen Gillan's acting again through that makeup. Her and Tony just as a pairing, that's just... This is what I'll give, like, the later Avengers movies and the MCU pre-Phase 4, is that the way they find to pair off characters is often very fun and very cool. They're playing, little paper football, and, like, as Tony's just being Tony and trying to teach her, like, she just has, like, this intense look of trying to learn the rules.
Yeah.
On her face.
She's taking it so seriously, and he's just being sort of snarky. Like, Tony Stark do. He's just sort of snarkily explaining the game.
It's written all over her face. Like, this is serious. I gotta learn these rules. And she's just, like, paying attention to, like, every move and word he says. And it's so cute. And he offers her like some of the food she has, and she rejects it and gives it back to him. She comes and he covers him up because he's dying because he's human.
Yeah.
And she's unfortunately mostly machine.
Yeah.
And that the whole opening like 15-20 minutes of Endgame, I think, is actually the strongest part of the whole movie. Captain Marvel comes and rescues them. I love the little moment that her and Nebula and Rocket share once they're back on Earth.
Yeah.
They just like sit there and hold hands and just kind of share silent trauma with each other.
Yeah, we've lost everything again.
They're the only ones that weren't snapped out of the group. And, you know, they're both the experiments.
Mm-hmm.
They're both the ones that were tinkered with and ripped apart and put back together. And that sort of like unspoken connection that they have is kind of like understated in like the later appearances of the characters, but it's there and it's really good.
I think that's... And then... Is there really much more we need to hit on with Endgame? I feel like...
No, only that later on Nebula kills her older self because she has developed into a empathetic and more caring person. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much wraps it up for Endgame. The holiday special, I'm not going to hit on too much with that. It's very cute. It's very fun. A lot of great moments with Drax and Mantis in particular. But it's revealed that Mantis is actually Peter's biological half-sister. She's one of the children of Ego. She was spared for some reason. And yeah, it
probably because of her powers.
Yeah, it just establishes more that, you know, there's more of this family connection between them.
And we're introduced to Cosmo.
Yeah. Introduce Cosmo with the talking Russian space dog with telekinesis. Also, Groot's buff now. He's grown out of his...
I love his design in the holiday special in Volume 3.
He's grown out of his awkward teen face from Infinity War. He's just jacked now.
He's in his Chad phase.
Yeah. He's young and hot and ready to mingle. And
I know we want to move on to Volume 3, but I do want to say that I absolutely love the beginning where that band's playing that Christmas song, and Groot's just in the back like, yeah, I am Groot! Yeah. Cheering because he's so into it.
Absolutely loving it. Yeah, let's get into Volume 3, though, because good lord, we're past the 2-hour mark. We're almost to the 2.5-hour mark.
Are you feeling the fatigue?
No, this is going to be a long-ass episode, and I need us to get into Volume 3, because holy shit, there's so much to say about it.
Okay. All right, let's get into Volume 3.
It's We 3 in space. It's We 3 in space.
It's We 3 in space, and... a lot happens, a lot goes on. I was an open fucking nerve the entire 2.5 hours of this movie.
So this one, this one's
okay. I knew this movie would cut me open.
We all knew.
I expected.
We saw the trailer and we're like, oh god, here it comes.
I did not expect to be misty-eyed from literally the opening seconds. Like, I don't know if it's because like I'm just more vulnerable of a person now in my older age, but like I was literally on the verge of crying this whole movie and cried like 4 times.
Okay, so this one, darkest about design. They wanted to really push the absolute maximum of how traumatized and pained these characters are, specifically through Rocket. Big opening scene is they're all hanging out on Nowhere, their new home. They've established it as like the base of the Guardians of the Galaxy. It's basically like this little rogue planetoid that they have a whole bunch of people living on now. I guess refugees and exiles and stuff. And then suddenly, Adam Warlock, who was teased at the end of Volume 2, shows up and tries to kidnap Rocket. They manage to fight him off, but Rocket is severely injured and comatose and dying, and they find out that they can't just heal him with their usual space magic voodoo stuff they got, because he's proprietary property of this big corporation, and they've got to get this specific thing that's basically latched to his heart. They got to unlock it before they can heal him. So the whole mission is just save Rocket. The whole movie, the big mission is save Rocket from dying. And throughout the whole thing, we're getting Rocket's flashbacks to his past as he's laying there dying. He's thinking of what his origin story and everything. Before we get into the actual Rocket backstory, there's a real feeling of Rocket's absence in this film, for both better and worse, because it establishes immediately, like, he's not going to be doing his usual thing with the rest of the team. He's out. want. Like, they're trying to save him. That's the mission. And you feel the weight of it in his absence. But at the same time, I found myself in a lot of scenes just wishing Rocket were here with his usual, like, sort of take on everything, his snarky humor and everything. I kind of missed it because there were moments where I was like, oh man, I really wanted to see Rocket's take on all this.
Yeah, I think that's the brilliance.
It is.
It's like you're missing him the whole time, and so is everybody else in the movie. Even though like his flashbacks and stuff really don't take up that much screen time, but they're so impactful. And when we switch back and forth, they just make you like understand his absence even harder and make you cheer on their mission even stronger, because without him, they're not whole. That's completely by design, and it's handled so well, I think, because even though they're a family and they've come together for each other finally, it's still their own personal demons that they're working through. Rocket hasn't come to terms with what he is, what happened to him. Quill can't get over Gamora, so he drinks himself into a stupor. Nebula's still, prickly and rigid, and Drax just, being himself is kind of getting on the nerves of people. But when somebody comes and threatens their friend, their family, it's, drop everything, let's go get him.
I like how solid the found family is at this point. It's, despite the bickering going on, this is the movie where it feels like, okay, in the first film, they were trying to figure each other out. They're starting to build this connection with each other. In the second film, it's very tense because we were trying to maintain something that's still on the rocks. In this one, the foundation's there. It's solid. It's strong. We're saving Rocket. He's a member of the family. We may bicker and argue over all of this, but damn it, we are all in this together.
Yeah, and the whole team mission, it's such a smart move to make the stakes so personal and small. Like, there's no like universe or galaxy threatening thing happening, yet it's the smallest scale story so far in the trilogy, yet on the biggest canvas. This movie's huge. Just the amount of environments and action set pieces and makeup and creatures. It's the best made one of the three. It's the strongest directed, I think. And it's like it made me feel that magic again of what a good Marvel movie is.
Yeah.
And it made me feel that like magic of what a really good just blockbuster can make you feel like in general. Just like when everything just looks good, sounds good, is executed well, and you're in it on every level.
It uses... Because when we started reviewing some MCU stuff right after Endgame, like Falcon and the Winter Soldier and WandaVision, we were both on board for that stuff because of the interesting ways that the events of Endgame and Infinity War were being used in the MCU. Now we're both basically tapped out again because we're like, okay, this is getting ridiculous. But this one in particular, it takes the massive scale events of Endgame and Infinity War and narrows it down to specifically how that impacts Peter and his relationship with Gamora. They're not fixated on, helping the galaxy heal from suddenly having lost half of its population. They're focused on Peter lost his Gamora. There's a new Gamora, but she's not her, and Peter has to come to accept that.
Yeah, there's so much just like empathy in this movie. Just like the second one, just a lot of it's just the characters like talking and like bearing their hearts out. And in a lesser movie, I keep saying that, in a lesser movie, Peter's pining for Gamora could come off as creepy or maybe manipulative.
Yeah.
And you can tell he's trying to like convince her, like, we used to be something, we used to have something.
Well, we know it's unhealthy. By the end of the movie, he acknowledges like what he's doing, trying to make this new Gamora fit his mold of what he believes her to be, is wrong.
Even though it's unhealthy, like it's not.
It's sad.
It's not played. It's sad, and it's not played. Well, it's kind of played for laughs, and there's a couple of quips, but they're well integrated.
Oh my god! The scene where she's like, "It sounds like you're more in love with her than me," and Gamora points at Nebula, and they're both like, "Oh no, absolutely not!" And then Quill has that moment where he just looks at her,
and she's at her like considering it,
and she's like, "Stop it!" And he's like, "I'm sorry, I just never noticed how black your eyes are." Such a good scene.
And when they're on the surface of the flesh planet, and like he's bearing his heart out, and like, he doesn't realize they're on open comms, and then there's just like I thought it would stop. I didn't know when it would end.
Yeah, please stop. This is unbearable.
And you feel for the guy. You truly feel for him because at this point he's pretty much not buffoonish Quill anymore. Mm-hmm. He picks up that kind of like roguish charmer Peter again to achieve the goal
but it's more of an act now. Around. He's more of an act.
Yeah, and he's not fucking around. Nobody's fucking around because you know this fucking bastard's got Rocket. We'll get to the high evolution.
Oh, absolutely.
These movies kind of make you like underestimate Quill, and then like make you realize, oh shit, you know, he's dangerous. You know, he's a badass.
Yeah, he's clever and resourceful and really good at killing people.
I got chills of like, just like, I got a movie boner when they're on the fucking second Earth, counter Earth, and they're in like the office of the High Evolutionary, and they just get done blasting everybody because Groot's got all these guns hidden in his roots. And he's got like spider arms, and it's so bad.
Yeah, they really utilize Groot's body in this one with like all the ways he goes full kaiju at one point.
And to escape, they just fucking tackle this asshole out of a window and ride him down into like a swamp, and Peter just knifes this fucking thing off of his head.
Yeah, he's stone cold. He don't give a shit. I will say with Peter...
Oh shit, I lost my headphones.
Pick them back up.
I'm a mess.
Pick them back up, tonight. Boy. You gotten sloppy, bitch.
I'm tired, like I said. 2 beers and being tired.
I will say...
At 33.
I will say I think they maybe pull a few too many strings with Peter in this one, because his main one is his relationship with Gamora, obviously also his desire to save Rocket, but they try and sort of shoehorn in this bit with him reconnecting with his biological grandfather back on Earth that really just didn't feel necessary, and it's kind of where his story resolves, is that he goes back to Earth to live with his granddad, and it kind of feels weirdly out of place here, because these movies so much have been about found family, and family isn't a matter of blood, it's a matter of who you connect with and who's there for you when you need it. I guess you could make the argument that like Quill needs to be there for his grandfather who was left all alone after his mother died, but we spend so much time building up this found family, and then by the end they depart, and some of them have good reasons for it, but Quill's just feels a bit extraneous.
I have to utterly disagree.
Really?
Yeah. I don't think it would be a lesser movie if that part was not in it, but I do think that that part being in it is a testament to how hard Gunn thought about wrapping all this up. Because it is kind of a dangling thread, because the very opening of the first movie, you know, he gets kidnapped, his mother dies, his grandfather's there, he loses his daughter and his grandson in the same night. In a story about people finally overcoming everything bad and terrible and traumatic that has defined them, building bridges again and coming to terms with everything and going back to where that trauma stemmed, I think it was really, really smart of Gunn to remember that and to incorporate that into his arc.
I can see that. I think if the grandfather was more of a prevalent figure throughout the films, or if the relationship between Quill and his grandfather was more important, I would have been more invested in it. But it kind of felt just sort of like, okay, his granddad, who was in the film for like 5 minutes in the first one, is now where we're resolving his story arc. Like, him going back to the place where his trauma started, I'm all on board with that. But, I don't know. I can see the elements there, they just didn't quite work for me.
Fair enough. Maybe another watch will make it gel.
Maybe. I've only watched this one once.
Like the second one, I honestly think that, you know, once another viewing is down, like, it all clicks more. Because there is a lot going on in this movie. God, where to go from
Let's step away from Quill for a minute. Let's get into the meat. Let's do Rocket.
The raccoon meat.
The raccoon meat. That tender, supple raccoon meat that keeps getting torn apart and stitched back together.
Jesus Christ. Another amazing opening credit scene where we're following Rocket through nowhere as he's listening to Peter's Zune, because he has a Zune now because Yondu gave it to him in Volume 2, and it's got 300 songs on it. 300. Mm-hmm. And they're not just rock and pop songs from the 70s anymore. It's a mix of everything. So the soundtrack in this one is more eclectic.
Yeah.
And he's singing along to the acoustic version of Radiohead's Creep. And the track listing for the soundtrack was released before the movie, and I couldn't help myself and looked at it. And I'm not going to lie, the music snob in me kind of bristled at first. Because I like Creep by Radiohead, but it's such a well-known song and pretty much memed to death at this point. Mm-hmm. I was like, oh, that's kind of an obvious pick. The other soundtracks were more deep cuts. That's kind of... But goddamn if it didn't work. Like... It's the fact that out of 300 songs on that Zune, that's the one that Rocket zeroes in on and like connects with.
Yeah.
You could say it's obvious, but who cares if it works so well?
Is it just Is it just me, or is in that opening scene, do we also get a little bit of hint of Rocket's age too? Because like
he does look kind of worn down.
He moves a little bit slower as he's walking through, and you can read it as just like, oh, he's sort of relaxed where he is right now. This is his new home. He feels comfortable here. But I kind of felt there was this sense of, and maybe it was me knowing how deep into his backstory we were going to get. Like he's moving a little bit slower. He's a little bit more tired. He's not the like young, aggressive raccoon that he was. He's getting up there for a raccoon. I don't know what the cybernetics did to him in terms of extending his life cycle, but he's getting pretty old there.
Yeah, and again, the VFX on him are on point.
Absolutely.
He looks more lifelike than he ever has, which is saying something because he's always been a great visual effect in these movies. When when Adam Warlock comes and fucks everybody up, he's hurting. He's foaming at the mouth. He's like knocking on death's door. Like, I'm like gripping my goddamn seat in the theater because it's so distressing. Because I think I took a lot of my like baggage with the MCU as a whole into this movie, and I'm like, if this one doesn't grab me, I'm gonna rage. And like, so I have all this like built up affection for these characters. Mm-hmm. And, like, this movie would have come out earlier if James Gunn wasn't fired for a controversy. So, like, it had all this stuff stacked against it. So, like, I had all this going into it. And then, like, it just comes out swinging. And I'm just... My heart's out there pounding the whole time.
Like every other installment in this trilogy, it just hits you out the gate. It's like, here we go. We're in it now.
Let's go save our friend. Let's go get our friend. And Peter's complete unwillingness to lose Rocket.
Oh, the whole team's. It's never a question. At any point.
Yeah.
Like, all of them are 1,000% on board of, like, we will kill anybody in our way. Literally, Drax is saying that at one point. It's like, we're gonna go to this place, we're gonna kill everyone. And Peter's like, no, we're not. We're not killing anybody. He's like, we're killing, like, some of them. And he's like, we're not killing anybody. He's like, one stupid guy, one worthless guy, one sad piece of shit. And Peter's like, you're just making it sad now, man. Like...
And then, Peter, he ends up going back on that a lot.
Yeah. I mean... Okay, we won't get to that point yet. It's way towards the end. We'll save it for then. But yeah, immediately at the gate, the stakes are set of Rocket's dying, gotta save him. And while the rest of them are going on that, we're getting Rocket's flashbacks, and we all knew it was rough. We all knew it was bad.
Eric was basically comatose by the end of this movie.
I can believe it. As much as she loves animals, holy shit.
Trigger warning, this movie is mostly about animal abuse.
Yep. So Rocket turns out to be the product of a being known as the High Evolutionary, whose whole mission is to create the perfect species and with it the perfect society. And in order to do this, he has built and destroyed entire civilizations over and over and over again, just killing his experiments with absolutely no care or regard for their lives. He's an absolute bastard of a villain and a perfect presence for that.
I meant to look up the actor's name before I sat down because I wanted to give him accolades. he freaking kills it because
it is. Oh my gosh, I cannot pronounce that name. I'm so sorry. I'm
pretty sure I can do it well.
Yeah, try.
Hang on, my phone's being slow.
Yeah, try
it. We got Chukwudi Iwuji as the High Evolutionary, and he's not just like, he is kind of one-dimensional, but he's not one-dimensional in that, you know, kind of mustache twirling way. He's
not Ronan.
He's disgustingly despicable.
Mm-hmm.
He plays that like childish petulance in a way that's like not like, that doesn't take away from his menace. It actually adds to it because he's ego driven, kind of like Ego, and then like it's only him and his vision and what he wants that he sees. That's the only thing that has value.
Yeah.
And just the callousness in the way he goes about everything he does just makes you absolutely hate him. Like the way he like will lose his temper and like yell at his underlings and stuff and like stamp his feet and just, you want to fucking throttle this guy.
He's a genius with the temperament of a child, and he's an absolute monster because of it.
You don't, credit to the movie, you don't explicitly see anything he does to these animals, but the visuals of the aftermath and their environment are enough.
Yeah.
To really sell it, because the first image is this like ominous giant hand reaching into a cage of baby raccoons, and the one that it's going for, you know, is obviously Rocket, because it transitions to his older face, and you know, it's more child abuse. Like,
yeah,
Peter was abused as a child, Gamora and Nebula were abused as a child, Rocket was abused as a child.
Mm-hmm.
And he has cellmates when he's not being experimented on, who are, two of them are characters from the comics. One of them, I think, is just for the movie. We got Toofs, who is a walrus, who is named Walrus in the comics. We have Lila, who is a cute little sweet otter, who is his love interest in the comics. And then we got Floor, who is the most visually distressing to look at because she's just this cute little white rabbit
on robotic spider legs, like something out of Toy Story, except there's blood. Like,
and this just this mouth gear, and
like, it literally looks like that spidery thing from Toy Story. You know, the first one with Sid with like the baby doll head on a spider body. Like, it's that, except it's a rabbit and it's bloody and it's horrifying. It's so sad and gross.
Rocket's first meeting with them, he's thrown in his cage. They're talking to him, trying to introduce themselves and get to know him. The first word out of his mouth is hurts.
Yeah. Every moment in the flashbacks just pain, because you know these characters are all gonna die.
And these characters, I was holding out hope though, because there's a shot in the trailer where Lila and Rocket are hugging. I'm like, oh, maybe that's them like meeting up in the future, in the current time. No, it's not.
Let's fast forward. Lots of traumatic stuff happens. Rocket shows like the High Evolutionary how to fix his next stage of evolution. The High Evolutionary was trying to basically like rapidly evolve animals into humanoids, and Rocket fixes it for him, showing that he's not just intelligent, he's creative, which none of the High Evolutionary's creations have ever shown, like creativity, which is why the High Evolutionary wants him now. He's like the one thing he ever made that shows that spark of creativity. And the High Evolutionary basically says, all right, now that we fixed the problem, let's, throw these all away. And Rocket stands up for his friends. He does his first invention, which is a key to unlock their cages. The first thing he ever invents is a key. And he frees his friends, but the High Evolutionary shows up, and they all get killed. In one of the saddest ways possible, because High Evolutionary kills Lila. That's totally on the High Evolutionary for being a bastard. Rocket loses his mind over this, attacks the High Evolutionary. He could have escaped after that, but because of his rage and pain over Lila's loss, he sticks around while the other two are freaking out. He sticks around and tries to kill all of the other assistants of the High Evolutionary as they're coming to rescue their boss. And as he's killing them, the other two animals get killed as well. So, add on top of the fact all this trauma, Rocket also blames himself for the death of his other two friends.
Yeah. Just, God, it's...
What was Floor screaming, by the way, after Lila dies?
I ask you, because I'm pretty sure I couldn't see the screen at this point because of my eyes, and I was just kind of like half gone.
Lila's there dead, and the walrus is freaked out, like backed into a corner, and the little rabbit is like hopping around screaming something. I think it's like, Rocket run, gotta run, Rocket run. She's just saying it over and over in this traumatized robotic voice, and it's
so distressing. I don't know what she was saying, but the repetitive way she kept saying it, and the pitch of her voice, and how scared she sounded was just like, oh my God. And Rocket's just like pained scream. Just and all of this, like, these aren't very long scenes, which I think are obviously for the best. And when you go back and watch the other movies, like, everything,
it all clicks into place.
It just has so much more weight and emotion.
Knowing that Rocket was traumatized by being an experiment is one thing. Knowing that he had a collection of friends who he tried to save and failed, and he blames himself for that, explains all of his actions in every scene he's in throughout these movies, because you can see himself pushing people away, trying not to get involved, trying to stay alone because he's terrified he's going to fuck up again.
And there's been an ongoing thing with the character throughout the entire MCU where he hates being called a raccoon. Because he doesn't know he's a raccoon. And at first, you might think it's just kind of a funny quirk. Like, he doesn't know he's a raccoon. He hates it. But later on, as it keeps going, you're like, oh, it's tied to whatever the fuck happened to him.
Yeah.
You know? Because he sees himself as this freak of nature. He doesn't like other people seeing him that way. And it's just... It's a point of pain for him to be called a raccoon, because being called a raccoon just kind of reminds him of his past.
He's not like everyone else.
He's not like everyone else. And then during the finale, I know we're skipping ahead, but it's worth it. During the finale, Rocket's free. They saved his life, thank God.
Yeah.
And he goes back to the lab.
They're trying to get everybody off of like the High Evolutionary ship as it's exploding, and he comes across the lab, and
there's a cage of baby raccoons still. And he just goes over there and just starts scooping them all up, because he's not going to let anybody like him or anybody in general suffer what he had to suffer ever again. And it's so fucking beautiful. Here I go. And he sees that he was a raccoon. He finally gets confirmation that he was a raccoon.
And he accepts it.
And he accepts it in his triumphant moment of self-actualization, like, I'm Rocket Raccoon. He finally says his full name.
That's so good.
God damn it.
It's so
fucking beautiful. Best character in the MCU.
Let's, since we're already here, I mean, I'm sure we're going to jump back to some other stuff. Let's talk about his final confrontation with the High Evolutionary.
Yeah.
Because the rest of the Guardians...
Very interesting point.
High Evolutionary shows up. He starts shooting at Rocket while he's got all these baby raccoons on him. The rest of the Guardians show up and help Rocket take him down. And Rocket has him down on the ground. We get the reveal that the High Evolutionary's face was so torn up that he basically had to put a fake flesh mask over it after Rocket...
Brutal!
Absolutely. It's all bloody and gross. Just all muscle and... Ugh, it's so mangled. But we see him lying there, and Rocket decides not to kill him. And I don't know why they did this.
Okay. I was going to ask you how you felt about them pulling that trope, that I'm not going to kill the villain trope.
I don't get it, because the Guardians of the Galaxy kill so many people on a regular basis. Why let this monster... I mean, granted, he probably died in the exploding spaceship anyway, but I guess at best, I would say that it's Rocket deciding to end the cycle of violence, but... I don't know.
The trope of I'm not gonna kill you, villain, because I'm better than you. I like it sometimes. I dislike it other times. I can see not liking the decision here because we hate the High Evolutionary so much, and we want to see him get his comeuppance so badly. But with Rocket's journey, it's not worth it to him anymore. Because he's finally accepted what he is, who he is, and his family. It's not that driving point with him anymore. The High Evolutionary's been beaten down. He's been defeated. He's going down with the ship. Rocket's not... He's not going to waste the time and energy to prove to the High Evolutionary that Rocket cares enough to pull the trigger anymore. Is how I took it. I had to think about it for a second, too.
I guess
on the ride home.
I don't know. It's one of those things that just didn't sit right, and maybe on repeated viewings it will, but if it was a different kind of character, I could feel it. But Rocket and the Guardians in general have always been so violently aggressive. These movies aren't about them becoming less violent. These movies are about them coping with their trauma and connecting with others. And for this movie to end with this weird pseudo non-violent message, it just... if it's supposed to be Rocket is past the High Evolutionary, it's not worth his time anymore. I would still argue that he knows that the High Evolutionary is a monster that needs to die. He doesn't want that to ever happen. Even if he's gotten past his trauma, he should still know that, like, no one else should have to suffer as he has. So... I don't know. It's just a weird ending for that. For it to be like, hey, you've gone through all this, and the monster who did this to you gets sort of spared, but not really, because he's going to go down with the ship.
Yeah, I guess I can see your point of view. At this point, I think it's just agree to disagree.
Yeah.
For the moment. There are so many things to talk about, but I feel like for the sake of your editing later,
let's hit Drax. Let's hit Drax.
Yeah, let's hit Drax.
Because we didn't talk about him yet. Drax is still his sort of goofy self. He's still got a lot of great moments with Mantis. Love their dynamic. He's got some fun with Nebula, who just does not get him. Nebula, like,
I fucking love Nebula.
Nebula is doing her best to sort of coexist with the rest of the team and sort of become intermingled with the rest. Like, if Gamora was kind of a stick in the mud in the earlier movies, Nebula is an absolute stick in the mud. And, like, she's trying to get connected with, and you see her sort of do it with the others, but she cannot stand Drax. She thinks he's an incompetent buffoon who's constantly endangering the mission and everything that they're trying to do. I think Mantis makes a fantastic point when they're having their argument when they first get on the High Evolutionary ship. Drax's value to the team is not as a competent warrior. He's a good fighter, he's strong, but he constantly makes bad strategic decisions. That's not his value to the team, though. His value to the team is that he's the only person who doesn't actively hate himself. Like, Drax is the one person who, on the Guardians, who has a good sense of who he is and what makes him happy, and that brings the others joy. And as simple as that idea is, it conveys both A, Drax's importance as a character, and B, Mantis's emotional intelligence and what she brings to the team. Because Mantis also comes off as a bit of a goofball, just, you know, dicking around with Drax, but she's incredibly emotional and intelligent. She's an empath. She can literally read emotions, and she helps people work through their emotional trauma through it.
Yep. Couldn't have said it better. Great use of both characters. I love how Mantis is just kind of this person that's able to put the team in their place when they need it and make them understand where everyone's coming from. I just love the way she says to Nebula, like, he loves us and he makes us laugh. You know, that's why he's here. You know, that's why he's part of the team.
Because they're a family. They're not just a team. Mm-hmm. They're a family.
And I love when, like, she, like, admits that she thinks he's an idiot, and then she erases his memory from that.
He's like, you think I'm stupid?
Like, they think they're going to die, and she doesn't want him to have that memory. Yeah. And she just, forget.
He's like, you think I'm stupid? And she's like, yes, forget. And he's like, ha, you all are so lucky I saved you. The
prickly Nebula just gives me life in this movie.
Before we jump into Nebula, I want to wrap up Drax. His ending there contextualizes his shift, because in Volume 2, you could make the argument he's making the shift into comedic relief, but in Volume 3, it contextualizes that shift as he's a dad. Because we see this group of children that have been kidnapped by the High Evolutionary. They're like the next stage of his evolution that he wants to make. And Drax is the one that manages to calm them down, to communicate with them, to get them to help with the mission in a way that keeps them all safe. And it's that paternal instinct he has that is what makes him the way he is. And at the very end, Mantis is like, you're not a destroyer, Drax. You're a dad. That line hit me so hard in the ending where I'm like, oh God.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful because he's a big goofball and he's good with kids and he likes kids, and it's the perfect ending for the character. The whole finale, aside from like Rocket getting rescued and Rocket rescuing the baby raccoons, you know, they're about to leave, but they're like, there's still a bunch of kids in there. You know, we can't leave them. And Rocket's like, well, I'm done running. And they don't even have to fucking talk about it because they're fucking badasses. They're all just like, all right, let's get this shit done. Second best needle drop of the entire series. No Sleep Till Brooklyn, Beastie Boys. Best action scene of the series when they just
that hallway
slay just the goons in the hallway in that one shot, just so bad.
One sweeping shot between each of them, just tearing people apart in that hall. It's so good.
I love how, despite everything going on, it doesn't end up just being about them rescuing Rocket. They're still heroes in their own right.
Yeah.
They're gonna save the kids and
the animals
and the animals and Mantis saving those
big
aliens
from the second one, from the start of the second.
And fucking love it when you just hear like Nebula off screen, like, why are you so slow? And like you see her just running with like a bunch of kids and she's got one in piggyback.
I love grouchy Nebula being group mom. Like reluctant group mom.
So hilarious. Like, Karen Gillan deserves so much props for this character. Like, I don't think she gets enough praise as a performer in these movies.
She also, like, despite her grouchiness, she's reached the point where she's definitely like a grouchy member of the family. She does so much to take care of the others. She's the one who carries Quill back to like bed whenever he's drunk. She like picks him up and like cradles him and carries him all the way to bed from the bar. And she also seems to be the one that does the most to make sure that the mission goes right. Like, she's the one who contacts Gamora and the Ravagers for their help. She's the one who's sort of directing everybody when Quill's not in the field. She's doing her best to make sure that Rocket gets saved and not just kind of reluctantly going along with it as you expect her to. I love the F-bomb. I love the F-bomb drop.
So good. So it's unceremonious. First F-bomb of the MCU. She can't open a car door. Just a standard American car door.
He's like, you gotta push in the thing. And he's like, get in the fucking car. It's like, it's so out of nowhere that's where they drop their F-bomb. It's like, okay, cool.
And she's got that just like confused deer in the headlights look she gets. Get in the fucking car.
Oh God.
Drax fucking clotheslining that guy off the bike.
Yeah, stealing his motorcycle. We didn't even talk about Furry World.
The Counter Earth. I love the fact that the High Evolutionary considers himself God. He says God, like, God doesn't exist, so I stepped in. He thinks so highly of himself But this perfect society, all he can do was just recreate like Earth in like the 80s, but with animal people.
But with furries! He made Furry World. His idea... You've spent how long trying to create the perfect society and the perfect species, and the best you can get is 80s Furry World? That's all you've got?
Such a good visual representation of his mediocrity.
Mm-hmm. And also mind. And also his deal with Rocket, because he's so obsessed with Rocket over the fact that Rocket is not just smart, he's creative. He shows that spark of inspiration that none of his other creations have, and it's also something he doesn't have. The High Evolutionary is not creative, he's just imitating the world around him.
Yeah, and his freaking faulty pride just can't handle the fact that one of his creations is smarter than him. Mm-hmm. So he's going to go through the ends of the earth to get him back and kill him. God, what a petty bitch.
Yeah. He's a real bastard, and I love it. Let's talk quickly about Adam Warlock.
Okay. I will say that at this point, he's probably the weakest part for me.
Yeah.
He still fits in with the themes of the film, which helps soften his kind of extraneous nature. I think Will Poulter as Adam Warlock is very fun.
Good performance, yeah.
But he's just a little bit too much in a movie that's already doing too much.
This one, I think, might have the strongest emotional whiplash because it still has that sort of funny hijinks comedy in it, but the depths of the trauma that they're willing to go to in this one makes those feel a little more out of place than they have in the past. Because the others have been willing to go dark before, absolutely, but this one pushes the dark envelope so far that when you do get back to the silly hijinks, like Adam Warlock finds this little pet furry thing and he's obsessed with it now, you're kind of like, weren't we just watching a bunch of animals get like torn apart and in cages and everything? Like, is this the same movie? Like, it does get a little more jarring than it has in the past.
That's funny because I was thinking this movie actually does the best of juggling the humor and the drama. Again, maybe a rewatch will make me side more with that or against it. I'm not sure yet. I like that Adam Warlock ties into the theme of, of second chances and opening up the family, opening up the team more. And because, like Rocket, he was just a baby,
Yeah, he was literally born yesterday. That's the whole gag.
And just like being exposed to the Guardians for just a little bit to see what they do for each other and sacrifice is enough to kind of turn him around. The movie almost lost me when they were faking out Peter's death.
Yeah, I was about to say, that felt forced.
It felt forced, but fucking James Gunn brought it back. I'm like, why is he going back? Why is it because they do the thing that they do in every movie where somebody gets frozen in space.
Yeah. Which you would really think that Peter, with all of his fancy space gear, he would keep that on him, considering how many times he's watched somebody near die in space. Like, I'm not one who usually nitpicks too many plot holes, but that was like, Peter, how many of your loved ones have died or had near-death experiences in space? You really didn't have your shit ready.
James, he was actually asked about that. He made it a point for his helmet to get broken in two, but they just brought it back for the Avengers movies. Mm-hmm. So that was like another kind of like discontinuity there. They're finally escaping. The ship's going down. He drops his Zune. He runs back for it. I'm like, oh, come on, dude. What are you doing? And then he almost dies. Adam Warlock comes and saves him in the last minute. And I'm like, that seems a little unnecessary. I didn't hate it, but it just seemed kind of like a fake out for no reason.
Yeah.
But the fucking ending, Rocket is gifted the Zune from Peter. The reason he went back is because he wanted to give it to Rocket because Rocket enjoyed it so much. And Peter knew he was going to leave the team, so he wanted to give something to Rocket. Made it all worthwhile.
I think you
brought it home.
I think you still could have communicated that without a fake out death, especially when so many of us were expecting a death in this movie. Like, so many people went into this movie thinking, oh, they're going to kill somebody. The way that these trailers are working, like, they're going to kill one of the Guardians, maybe a few of them. And for us to get a fake out death like that really only serves as, like, make Adam Warlock a little more important to the plot than he is. I don't know.
Well, see, that's the thing. I was thinking about how every movie has the somebody dies in space moment. it's not like James Gunn like resting on like a trope because he can't think of anything. It's part of the whole themes of the trilogy. Like it's this band of misfits, these losers, that really shouldn't have come together, but they're always faced with these insurmountable odds, and they're shown their truest selves, their best parts, in service of saving another life. Whether it's Peter saving Gamora from freezing in space in the first one, whether it's Yondu saving Quill by sacrificing himself in space, or Quill going to get the Zune for Rocket because they just spent however amount of time trying to save his life, and he wanted to give his friend a farewell present. So like these goofballs like being juxtaposed against like the vastness, cold death of space, and willing to face it for each other in like every movie, I really appreciate.
This one was just the weakest of those, though. I feel like the other times they've used it throughout the trilogy, it's far more impactful. Can we talk about how absolutely heartwarming it is that when Rocket wakes up, there's no jokes or quips or anything. They just straight up hug him. Mm-hmm. Like, I think he says something when he first sits up, and then the rest of them just hug him. There's no attempt at like subverting it with humor like there might have been in earlier installments. It's straight up just a show of emotional vulnerability and care that they have reached. That shows how far they've come. They don't have to undermine each other and make everything a quip. They can finally just treat each other with love and care.
Yeah, gorgeous. And when Nebula hears that he's alive over the radio, she just like breaks down in like relieved tears. So good. And I like because Gamora's there while they're trying to revive Rocket, and it's not working. And because she's not their Gamora, she's like, it's too late. He's gone. Give up. And Quill's just like, I am not losing him. He's like forceful. He's like, I'm not losing.
Yeah.
And like she knows to like step back and let them have that moment when he's revived. Peter finally letting go of Gamora at the end, because she gets in his face, like what do you think I'm gonna fix in you? Who do you think I am? Like, yeah, that can fix what's missing in you. They have their parting of the ways, and like, I can't remember, was it him or her who said, I bet we were fun? It was her, right? It was Gamora, because that makes the most sense.
Yeah, I think it was her.
Another cute line that works so well, and
it's a perfect way for them to part ways, because I was so worried going in that this was going to be like he finds a way to seduce her all over again,
to woo her again.
Yeah, but it does the perfect job of like, no, this isn't her, this isn't the woman he fell in love with. He has to move past the fact that she's gone. Like him holding on to Gamora, his old Gamora, is what's keeping him back. And it's the perfect tie together for Quill's arc, because he has been a man-child defined by his unwillingness to grow up and move on past his trauma. And this latest one, the latest trauma he's faced where he lost the love of his life, this is the moment where he finally feels complete, because he's been brought to his absolute lowest. He's lost the person who basically dragged him up to his more mature level in the earlier films, and now he finally gets that catharsis of like, because of my relationship with her, with my Gamora, I'm finally mature enough to let her go.
Mm-hmm. And Drax and Rocket dancing together on Nowhere. Drax finally decides that he likes dancing. Rocket just seems at ease now. He seems at peace now. He's looser. He's not cynical anymore. I like that it's Nebula, Rocket, and Drax that stay together on Nowhere.
Yeah. Because
that makes the most sense to me.
Yeah, although Nebula and Drax aren't really members of the team anymore. They're not. They say that they're going to be busy, building a new home for all these kids that they basically suddenly adopted. So Rocket...
Once a guardian, always a guardian.
Yeah, I know that. But, like, the movie ends with a whole new team led by Rocket. And the fact that Rocket went from being the absolute loner into a leader role is perfect. Like, that's where he needed to be in his ending. I will say, stupid line... is Groot's. Like, they were trying to recapture the emotional weight of We Are Groot, but Groot just says, "I love you guys" at the very end, and it's like, you can just fucking talk now?
Oh my god, Isaac, I can't believe you missed the point. That's not... The point is we can understand him now. That's the point. The movies make a case that as you get to know Groot and are endeared to him more, you understand him. Because at first, only Rocket could. Now everybody can. And at the end, when he says, "I love you guys," that's us, the audience, finally being able to understand him at the end of this journey. So he didn't speak English. It's just we finally can hear what he's actually saying.
I like that headcanon of yours, Tyler.
It's not headcanon. Isaac, you're the English major who spent how many years
Tyler
under sifting through subtext and thematic bullshit.
That's fine. I like what you're saying. I think that's cool, and it's definitely made me recontextualize it. That's not the definitive thing that happened. There's nothing
totally the definitive.
There's not anything in the movie that says that, we the audience now understand Groot.
It's supported by 2 whole movies before and spin-off appearances.
Don't act.
You needed the exposition. You needed the hardcore exposition.
Don't act like this was a super obvious, easy slap in the face thing. This is something that you came up with. Obvious, easy. This is something that you came with.
I'm just gonna say you're gonna feel silly. You're gonna feel silly when you understand that that's pretty much how everybody interprets it.
Okay, sure. Anyway. Now that you've tried to insult my intelligence,
you did it earlier to me, so it's
on what?
I can't remember. It happened. It was a while.
You
ago,
insulted my intelligence on what? I don't know. I'm too stupid to remember.
You're not coming over anymore on Saturday. I revoke my invitation.
Fuck you. I think this is...
You can't hang out anymore.
I think this is officially the longest episode we've ever done.
Oh yeah, definitely. Do you want to forego any of the extra shit we do at the end?
Yeah.
Or do you want to just wrap it up with final thoughts?
Wrap up with final thoughts. We didn't mention Cosmo's adorable. She bickers with Kraglin the whole time because he calls her a bad dog after she shows him up. And, it's cute. There's not much to say about it, but it's cute.
Yeah, you know what the payoff is going to be immediately, but it's still good.
It's fun. Final thoughts on the Guardians trilogy.
I have some final thoughts.
Yeah.
We have made it known countless times on this podcast that we have been fans of the MCU, but are very, very disenfranchised with it now. I'm not going to shit on it right now.
I just want it to end so I can look back on it fondly.
No.
I just want it to end so I can look back on it fondly, Tyler. Let me get nostalgic. I can't get nostalgic if it won't die.
That's what I'm saying. Even though I've been very, very disenfranchised with it for the past couple years, I haven't seen half of what Phase 4 is. I haven't seen Ant-Man yet. Never going to, probably. Mm-hmm. But there's still been a part of me that's been clinging to it a little bit. But this movie, Guardians 3, was my chance to say goodbye to the MCU. And I feel catharsis on 2 levels in that I find this movie to be a successful goodbye to the Guardians and a successful goodbye for me to the MCU.
Yeah.
Now I feel like I feel good. I feel done. Like I'm happy now.
Yeah.
I'm finally at peace with it now because for me, it has ended.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. I think the same thing, actually. I've got no investment in any of the upcoming projects. I haven't even watched the new Black Panther, which I actually was looking forward to. And
I've been meaning to. I just can't muster the energy to.
It was nice to have an MCU project to care about again, and it's nice to have one that feels done. And I know they freaking said in the end credits thing they're bringing back at least Star-Lord. It's just
Star-Lord.
Star-Lord.
The Lord of Stores.
The Lord of Stores. It's just This feels like a good stepping off point. I know there's going to be a million bajillion new things, new projects. They're going to milk this thing until literally nobody goes to see them anymore, which apparently isn't stopping anytime soon. But yeah, I agree. This is where I call it with the MCU. We're done. You did good, kid. You gotta stop. Like, we had fun. Let me look back on you and as a wonderful part of my life instead of something that's never gonna leave me alone.
Yes. This we're not saying this in bitterness. We're saying this in farewell.
And specifically with the Guardians trilogy, these movies are such beautifully flawed films. Like, each one has its problems in different ways, but despite that, the highs that they reach in storytelling, they're the funniest, most heartfelt, some of the best action and visuals in the MCU. This is like the fact that they are so separated from the rest of the MCU and they're still like the best things that the MCU does, shows that you don't really need to have this over-connecting universe. You can just tell good stories with good characters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these characters wormed their way into my heart in 2014 in a way that I didn't expect, and I've grown very, very attached to them. They mean a lot. They mean a lot to me in ways that I didn't expect, and in ways that most modern blockbusters haven't been able to manage.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just glad I have this beautiful trilogy about these freaking goofballs.
Yeah,
that I can enjoy now.
Tyler, let's rate the damn things and be done with them. Volume 1. What do you give Volume 1?
Volume 1. I give Volume 1... Oh, God, I can't even think of anything clever. Volume 1 is my third favorite MCU movie. That's what I'm giving it.
Okay. I will give Volume 1 4 out of 5 jackasses standing in a circle.
Nice. I'm glad you can muster the clever ratings.
Mm-hmm. Volume 2.
I will give Volume 2 the could possibly change soon ranking of my favorite MCU movie.
Okay. I'll give it 90 out of 100 dead Ravagers in space.
Damn.
Yeah.
That's hardcore.
And
I hope the rating for the third one isn't something sad.
Volume 3, Tyler, what's your rating?
I give Volume 3 the rating of my second favorite MCU movie.
I give Volume 3 out of 4 cybernetic animal experiments.
Yeah, I figured you were going to go there.
Oh, God. Well, I think that's going to do it for us. If you like this episode, share it with your friends or give us a like or a comment. Thank you for listening, and remember, don't throw your baby in the trash, and don't do
that hits hard after this one.
Don't do horrifying experiments on your poor raccoon baby. Cubs? Raccoons have cubs, right?
Yeah, sure, we'll go with that.
Okay, good night, everybody, and goodbye, MCU.
Goodbye, MCU.